I want a divorce. A clean slate. She said it while scraping marmalade onto sourdough toast, like she was ordering a damn latte. No eye contact. No tremble in her voice. Not even the decency to fake a tear. Just a clean, sterile declaration, delivered over the clink of a butter knife and the soft hum of the dishwasher. Doug blinked once. They'd been married 27 years. Built a home together, literally. He designed it, she decorated it. She picked the peonies, he hand-laid the stone path. He still had the scar from when he smashed his thumb hanging those god-awful wind chimes she had to have from Santa Fe. And now she wanted a clean slate? Like he was a chalk smudge on her beautiful new whiteboard life? He set down his coffee. No sugar, just like always. His hands didn't shake, but something in his chest shifted. Like a beam giving way behind drywall, nothing visible yet, but you could feel it. The internal structure had cracked. She was already talking about amicable terms, about him taking whatever he needs, as if she was offering leftovers from a potluck. Then she slid the house keys across the table like a dealer in Vegas. You can keep the place if it means that much. I'd prefer something newer anyway. He didn't touch the keys. All right, he said. Just that. One word. No plea. No accusations. He didn't ask who he was being replaced with. Though he could guess, Trish had developed an annoying habit of texting someone named CL every night around 10:45 p.m., screen tilted conveniently away from him. She looked almost disappointed, like she expected a fight, maybe even wanted one, to justify the story she'd already rehearsed for her friends. He couldn't handle it. He got aggressive. I just needed peace. But Doug didn't give her the performance. Instead, he stood up slowly, like every vertebra had aged another year since she opened her mouth. Walked past the pantry, where they still kept the emergency flashlight he bought during the 2003 blackout. Past the wedding photo in the hallway that she never took down, probably because she'd stopped seeing it. Into the bedroom, where her suitcase was open from last weekend's spa trip that still smelled faintly of men's cologne she'd never bothered to explain. He pulled his duffel bag from the closet. Not the suitcase. The duffel. Just one. Like he was going to the gym and might never come back. He packed deliberately. One pair of jeans, 2 button-ups, socks, toothbrush. Nothing sentimental. Not even the watch she gave him on their 20th. That stayed in the drawer, ticking away someone else's time now. Trish didn't follow him. He heard the scrape of toast crust into the compost bin. The whir of the blender, banana kale again, probably. He wondered how many mornings she'd rehearsed this scene in her head, and how proud she was that she handled it maturely. As he walked past her to the door, she finally said, "Doug?" He turned, slowly, calm as a monk. "Don't make this ugly." His lip twitched. Almost a smile. Almost. "I won't," he said. "You're doing just fine on your own." And with that, he stepped outside, into the morning sun that suddenly felt too bright for April. By the time she poured her second cup of coffee, his car was gone. The silence in the house must have felt heavy for a moment, until she filled it with a Bluetooth speaker and a Spotify playlist titled New Beginnings. What she didn't know was that Doug hadn't driven off aimlessly. He didn't need time to process or heal. He already had the keys to a cabin upstate, and a name she never wanted to hear again. The patio lights twinkled like it was Christmas in May, casting soft gold on a crowd of middle-aged women wrapped in cashmere shawls and wine buzz. Trish stood at the head of the table, one hand curled around a stemless glass of Barolo, the other gesturing theatrically as she mimicked Doug's stone face when she dropped the bomb. I said, "I want a divorce," and he just nodded. Nodded, like I'd asked if he wanted decaf. The women howled. Lisa snorted Pinot through her nose. Carrie wheezed into a linen napkin. Someone clapped. Trish loved it. She'd never been the funny one before. Doug had always been the quiet wit at gatherings, the one who'd slip in a dry one-liner and steal the laugh without trying. But now she was the center of the stage, center of the garden. Her garden. It was the first dinner party without him, and she'd made damn sure it looked like freedom. Fresh white cushions on the patio set. New fire pit from that overpriced boutique downtown. She even had one of those Scandinavian water features installed, just for ambience. The backyard now whispered, "Doug who?" He used to say this yard didn't need a pergola. She smirked, waving toward the brand new wooden arch that loomed awkwardly over the grill like a gallows. "So I built one. Out of spite." Another round of laughter. Someone poured more wine. Trish soaked in the validation like sun on bare shoulders. It wasn't just the divorce. It was the upgrade. She told them she was thinking of converting his old drafting room into a reading lounge. Lots of light. Maybe a glass wall. I'm finally breathing again. It sounded good out loud. Maybe true. Then Debbie, always Debbie, ruined the mood. She was the kind of woman who wore clogs to dinner parties and still said, per my last email, in actual conversation. She swirled her wine and said, "Oh, funny you mentioned Doug. I think I saw him last week, outside Sloan and Keene." The laughter stalled like a skipped record. Trish's smile froze at the corners. "Sloan and Keene," she repeated, tone light but eyes sharp. Debbie nodded. "Yeah, you know the place near the courthouse? My nephew used them when his business partner tried to screw him. Real sharky firm." I waved, but Doug didn't see me. The table shifted. Lisa glanced at Carrie. Someone refilled their glass, just a little too full. Trish laughed, quick and brittle. "Oh, probably handling the paperwork. Standard stuff," she said. Debbie shrugged. "Could be, though I think he was with someone. Another guy. Had a briefcase and everything." Trish took a sip, bigger than she meant. The wine burned. She waved it off. Doug always overdoes things. Probably hired a whole team just to cancel the water bill. The women laughed, but it didn't sound as genuine this time. That night, after they'd all left and the string lights buzzed over a now empty table, Trish sat by the fire pit and stared at the stars she used to trace with Doug's hand in hers. Sloan and Keene. She hadn't thought about lawyers since the online forms she'd printed from LegalZoom. Their divorce had been so easy. Too easy. Doug hadn't even asked for the house. Just signed the documents like she was doing him a favor. And now he was meeting with a shark firm? Trish tapped her wine glass against her knee and stared across the dark yard. A breeze shifted the new wind chime. It clinked just wrong, off-key, out of place. Like something pretending to belong. She told herself it was nothing. But her gut had that low, sour churn it used to get when Doug knew something and was just waiting to let it slip. Like the time she claimed she'd spent the night at Lisa's, but he'd seen the mileage on the car the next morning and never said a word. Just filed it away. She hated that look he got when he was 2 steps ahead and didn't feel the need to say it. The stars looked colder than usual. The house behind her stood still and quiet, but something in the bones of it had shifted. Like a beam somewhere, silently bending. Ready to crack. Wednesday morning started with silence. A rare thing in that house, where Doug's quiet was never actually quiet. More like a steady rhythm. The creak of floorboards as he padded to the kitchen. The soft click of the coffee maker starting its drip. The faint hum when he pulled up architectural plans on that old drafting monitor with the flickering corner he refused to replace. But that day, nothing. Trish stepped into the kitchen, heels clicking like an intruder's footsteps. The sink was dry. Coffee machine unplugged. She blinked at the empty mug hook, the one that always held Doug's stained "Architects Do It With Plans" mug. A corny gift from their daughter years ago. Ugly thing. She'd always hated it. Now it was gone. She opened the fridge. His oat milk, gone. The sourdough loaf he sliced methodically every morning, gone. The butter tray was wiped clean, like someone had scrubbed away a fingerprint. "Doug," she called. Not because she wanted him to answer. Just because the silence was starting to feel heavy. No answer. Upstairs, the bedroom closet was open but orderly. His clothes were mostly untouched. Neat rows of pressed shirts. His favorite brown blazer still hanging next to the garment bag he used for weddings and funerals. But the duffel was gone. So were his hiking boots. And the black leather folder he used for important papers, which usually lived in the locked drawer of his desk. Trish stood in the middle of their room, still in her robe, trying to piece it together. She wandered to the study, expecting to find him hunched over his desk, fiddling with sketches like always. But what she found made her stop short. The drafting table was bare. Completely bare, except for 2 things. The brass architect's ruler she'd bought him their 3rd Christmas together, and a single manila envelope. She opened it with one sharp nail. Inside, a signed deed transfer form. Her name filled the top. His signature at the bottom. No lawyer's signature. Just a post-it stuck to the front that read, "Don't say I never gave you anything." She stared at it. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He was supposed to grovel. Get passive-aggressive. Maybe storm out. sleep at a friend's place, make a dramatic return weeks later to plead for counseling. Instead, he'd handed her the deed like a tip on a hotel nightstand. She spent the rest of the day calling around. His office hadn't heard from him. He'd cleared out his personal files on Monday. No emails, no explanation. She called their daughter, Kate. "He's not answering my texts either," Kate said. "He sent me a photo of a lake yesterday. No caption, no location. Was it upstate?" Trish asked, trying to sound breezy. "He mentioned something about a trip." "Maybe. He didn't say. He just wrote, 'Quiet here.' That's it. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Trish snapped too fast. "Just odd, that's all." Very dramatic of him. But that night, lying alone in the house she'd supposedly won, Trish noticed the air felt different. Not lighter, like she'd told herself it would. He'd taken something with him. Not just his boots and folder, but something structural. The hum was gone. The rhythm was broken. The silence had sharp edges now. She walked past the bookshelf he built in '03, ran her fingers along the worn corners he'd sanded down after she nicked her leg on one. His little touches were still everywhere. The groove on the banister where he used to rest his thumb going up the stairs. The uneven spacing on the garden fence he always promised to fix, but never did. And still, no word. Not a text. Not a missed call. No forwarding address. She went to check his email, but found it locked behind a changed password. The same with their shared cloud drive. His side was wiped clean. All his files, backups, blueprints, gone. Trish told herself this was a win. But in the dark, in that enormous house where every echo now sounded unfamiliar, she realized something was off. This wasn't retreat. This was erasure. And Doug never erased anything without a blueprint for what came next. The bookshelves were the first to go. Too narrow. Too outdated. Doug. Trish stood in the study, sipping a green juice while two-day laborers pried the oak frame from the drywall, splintering the careful joinery he once obsessed over. She didn't flinch when the molding cracked. Didn't stop them when the upper shelf caved in and spilled old blueprints like dead leaves. "Take it all," she said. "Every last inch." The next week, she ordered French doors, real custom work, the kind Doug always said were overpriced and impractical. If you want insulation, he'd warned once, buy a solid core. Now she was spending 10 grand on aesthetics, just to feel the opposite of practical. She painted over the soft clay walls he'd insisted on in 2011. Earth tones soothed the nervous system, he'd claimed, like she was some patient in a trauma ward. No more. Now it was bone white, sharp-edged minimalism. Cold and clean, just like her new life. Or so she told herself. The contractor showed up on a rainy Monday morning with a truckload of custom-cut glass and walnut framing. Trish greeted them in leggings and a cashmere cardigan, waving a non-fat latte like a wand. "Back entrance is open. Just start unloading." But 5 minutes later, the site manager came back, phone in hand, brows furrowed. "Ma'am, I think there's a problem with the title." Trish blinked. "The what?" "The title," he said. "We ran the standard check before the install, just to cover our end. It flagged a transfer. New ownership came through last night." She scoffed. "That's impossible. My name's on the deed. I have the deed." He hesitated, then flipped the screen toward her. There it was. County records. Timestamped. Certified. The house had a new listed owner. Trish Elaine Morrow, removed. Replaced by Diane Whitaker. Trish's stomach dropped so fast, she nearly lost grip of the coffee. Diane. That name hadn't been said aloud in her house in 14 years. Not since the incident. Not since the wedding Doug wasn't supposed to attend. Not since Trish had screamed into a phone at her own sister. "You're dead to me." The site manager glanced nervously at her. Should we cancel the unload?" She didn't answer. Instead, she walked through the half-renovated house like a ghost retracing its own steps. Down the hall where the art she'd just ordered now felt like props on someone else's set. Past the bare space where the bookshelves used to be, just exposed nail holes now, like Doug's absence made physical. The doorbell rang. It was a courier. Padded envelope. Legal-sized. Inside, a certified copy of the property transfer. Notarized. Fully executed. The purchase, through a trust, was finalized 3 days ago. The trust had now disbursed title rights to Diane Whitaker. There was a sticky note attached. In neat, firm handwriting she recognized instantly. You said you wanted something new, so I gave you the chance. No signature, no logo, but the paper smelled faintly of cedar, his old cologne. She sat down on the floor, right there in the foyer, surrounded by swatches and catalogs and her vision boards that suddenly looked like the scrapbook of a lunatic. Doug hadn't just left. He'd laid a silent fuse beneath her fantasy, and now it was exploding in the most polite, bureaucratic way imaginable. The walls didn't shake, but the foundation? Oh, it shifted. The knock came at 7:38 a.m., too early for packages, too deliberate for neighbors, too sharp to ignore. Trish stood barefoot in the kitchen, still in her robe, coffee trembling slightly in her hand. She had barely slept. The title transfer documents had arrived the day before, and since then, she'd called the county clerk's office 4 times, her lawyer twice, and her therapist once. None of them gave her what she wanted to hear. She opened the door expecting a courier. Maybe a mistake. Maybe, please God, a reversal. Instead, there stood Diane. Hair pulled back, neutral lipstick, leather gloves, like a woman who had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. She held out a keyring, the old brass kind Doug used to carry, the one with the black rubber collar he swore helped him grip better. A relic of habit. Trish's eyes locked on it like it was a gun. What are you doing here? Trish's voice came out thin, brittle. Diane smiled, not cruelly. Worse, calmly. Moving in, she said, stepping over the threshold like she'd been rehearsing it. Didn't Doug tell you? Trish blocked her with a hand, palm flat. You can't just walk in. But Diane was already walking, past the foyer, past the dining room, paused at the wall Trish had painted over last week, where Doug once mounted a brass compass he said would keep us pointed the same direction. Still smells like fresh paint, Diane said. Shame. I always liked the clay. Trish closed the door slowly, trying to keep her hands from shaking. You bought it through the trust, she said. It wasn't a question. Diane nodded. Technically, the trust bought it. I just happened to be the beneficiary. Doug set it up perfectly. Trish's jaw clenched. You haven't spoken to me in over a decade. Doug has, Diane said. There it was. The real dagger. Trish's face drained. You stayed in touch with him? Diane didn't gloat, didn't smirk. She just looked around, quietly tracing her fingers along the stair railing. He reached out 6 months ago. Said he was thinking of downsizing. Said the house needed someone who'd appreciate it. You think this is appreciation? Trish hissed, motioning around at the half-gutted living room. You took this. You both did. Behind my back. Diane looked her dead in the eye. You gave it away. The day you told him you wanted a clean slate. The words hung in the air like a gas leak. Dangerous. Invisible. Lethal. Trish felt like she'd been hit by a truck full of her own words. I'm calling a lawyer, she said, scrambling for her phone. You already did, Diane said calmly, setting her leather handbag on the entryway bench like she owned it. Because she did. And the sale is clean. Irrevocable. The trust paid market price. All above board. Trish stood frozen, phone in hand, trying to summon rage but finding only a sick, slow-burning panic rising from her gut like bile. This wasn't just real estate. This was history. This was Diane, the sister she'd burned in a fit of moral superiority 14 years ago when she accused her of ruining a family wedding, of embarrassing their parents, of using tears as currency. Doug had been the only one who didn't take sides back then. At least, that's what Trish thought. Now she realized he had. Quietly. Strategically. Like always. Diane walked upstairs. Paused at the top step. You've got until Friday to clear your things. Trish stared up at her like a woman watching a chandelier fall in slow motion. You don't belong here. Diane turned her head slightly. Maybe not. But you don't either. And then she disappeared down the hall, into the master bedroom, the one Trish had just paid to repaint. Trish stood there for a long moment, listening. The silence upstairs was deafening. The kind of silence that sounds exactly like Justice Landing. The sound of Diane humming in the kitchen was worse than nails on glass. It was cheerful, effortless, domestic. Trish stood just outside the doorway, gripping the edge of the hallway cabinet until her knuckles blanched white. The same cabinet Doug built for her spices, back when he still cared whether dinner had flavor. Diane was barefoot, chopping something on the cutting board like she'd done it there 1,000 times. Her silver bracelet clinked softly every time the knife hit the wood. The same bracelet Trish had refused to return all those years ago after the wedding fight. The one she claimed was a gift, even though Diane had bought it for herself. "You're really doing this," Trish said from the doorway. Voice flat. Cold. Diane didn't turn. "Doing what?" "Playing house. Pretending like you belong here." "I'm not pretending anything," Diane said calmly, still dicing onions. "This house belongs to me. Legally. Officially. Clean transfer. I have the paperwork if you want to frame it." Trish took a step in, her breath hitching as onion fumes hit her eyes. But it wasn't just the sting that brought tears. It was this. This absurd tableau of her estranged sister using her countertops, her kitchen island, acting like she'd inherited some family estate instead of backstabbing her way into it through Doug's back door. "This is retaliation," Trish snapped. "That's all this is. Payback." Diane finally looked up. Her eyes were calm, but there was something hard beneath them, something fossilized. "It's not retaliation. It's restoration. Doug said it was time I got something back." "You mean from me?" Diane shrugged. "Call it balance. You slept with my fiancée." Trish exploded, slamming a hand against the marble counter. "You humiliated me. You ruined that wedding." Diane didn't flinch. "No, Trish. He did that. I just stopped pretending like the two of you weren't a walking disaster. Everyone saw it coming except you." 14 years of dust blew up in a single sentence. Trish's chest heaved. "You're in my house." Diane's lips curved slightly. "Correction, Doug's house. Which he sold. To me. Because he knew exactly who you are." "I'll fight it." "Go ahead," Diane said, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I'll even give you a head start. But I hope your lawyer explains what irrevocable means." Trish didn't move. Her reflection in the kitchen window was a stranger, pale, tight-lipped, eyes wide with a kind of horror she didn't know how to wear. She'd been the one with control. The one with the friends, the garden parties, the curated Instagram shots of wine with a view. And now she was the one standing in the doorway like an unwanted guest while the woman she blacklisted from the family group chat cooked in her designer kitchen. "What do you want from me?" Trish finally whispered. Diane didn't miss a beat. "Nothing." That stung more than anything. Because it was true. Diane didn't want revenge. She already had it. She wasn't gloating, wasn't throwing it in her face. She was simply present, breathing, occupying the space Trish believed was hers by divine right. The fantasy Trish had of her new life, of hosting elegant brunches, of reinventing herself post-divorce as some carefree, empowered woman, collapsed quietly in that kitchen like a souffle slammed with a door. She turned and walked out before her legs gave out. Slammed the front door behind her, but it didn't feel like her door anymore. From the driveway, she stared back at the house Doug built, she designed, and Diane now occupied. A perfect suburban dream turned inside out. Outrage filled her like gas in a sealed room. But beneath it, slowly creeping in, was something worse. Helplessness. For the first time in decades, Trish wasn't at the center of the story. She was on the outside. And the curtains were closed. She didn't knock. The screen door clattered open so hard it bounced off the frame. Trish marched inside. Gravel still stuck to her heels, breath short, cheeks flushed, her scarf trailing like a noose. Doug was by the window, peeling an apple with that same old pocket knife she once begged him to stop carrying. The room smelled like cedar and cheap coffee. Sparse furniture. No clutter. No noise except the wind tapping against the window panes. He didn't even turn around. "You sold it to her?" she hissed. Still slicing, still quiet. One long apple peel coiled like a snake on the cutting board. She stepped closer. "Answer me, Doug. You sold a house. To Diane. My sister." He glanced over, finally, with the slow patience of someone who'd already rehearsed this scene in his mind and knew how it ended. "You said you wanted a clean slate," he said. Voice low, steady, surgical. "You think this is clean?" she snapped. "You knew exactly what you were doing." He nodded. "Just once." "I did." She blinked, thrown by the bluntness. "You gave her everything." "I gave you everything," Doug corrected. "You just didn't recognize it." She let out a sharp, ugly laugh. "Don't you dare play Buddha with me. You knew I hadn't spoken to her in years. You did this to humiliate me." "No," he said. "You humiliated yourself. I just gave you the mirror." Trish took a step back, suddenly aware of how small the cabin was. The way Doug stood there, calm, resolute, with nothing to lose, felt unfamiliar, like someone who had shed his skin and burned it on the way out. I want it back, she said, quieter now. I'll buy it, whatever the cost. Diane can keep the damn furniture. Just give me back my house. Doug's jaw twitched, just slightly. He set the knife down. The apple slice landed on the plate without a sound. It's not your house anymore, Trish. I made that place a home, she shouted. I picked every tile, every light fixture. You turned my office into a sunroom. That landed like a punch. His eyes met hers for the first time fully. No soft edges, no sadness. Just cold, polished steel. You stripped it down like a corpse, he continued. Every shelf I built, every corner I measured by hand, gone. You didn't want the house. You wanted the stage. She swallowed hard. So you handed it to her. She never asked for it. She never expected it. She just listened. Trish's mouth opened, but no words came. The weight of it all hit like a landslide. He hadn't just left. He hadn't disappeared in grief or cowardice. He'd retreated to plan. Quietly. Precisely. While she was busy flaunting her liberation in Instagram posts and wine nights. You're not even angry, she said finally, voice trembling. You're what? Above it all now. Doug gave a small shrug. Anger's a younger man's game. She stood frozen for a second, unsure what she even came to take. She wanted him to be shattered. Wanted him to scream, to accuse, to show something that proved she still had weight in his world. Instead, he just turned back to the window, picked up the knife, and resumed peeling. Close the door on your way out, he said. The apple peel fell again. Unbroken. Perfect spiral. She left without slamming it. Not because she didn't want to, but because something in his tone made her realize there was no door left to slam. He hadn't locked her out. He'd simply stopped building houses with doors she could open. She came back the next morning, makeup sharper, voice steadier, fury repackaged as righteous indignation. This time she knocked 3 times, like a prosecutor entering chambers. Doug opened the cabin door without a word, moved aside, let her in. No questions. No warmth. Trish didn't sit. Didn't need to. You owe me the truth, she snapped, pacing like a cat in too small territory. Why her? Why Diane? Was it always some secret alliance to get back at me? Are you sleeping with her? Is this some pathetic midlife revenge fantasy? Doug didn't move from the kitchen. He was pouring hot water over coarse coffee grounds in a steel French press. Slow. Mechanical. Unbothered. When he finally spoke, it was without heat. You were cheating for a year. Trish blinked. What? He turned, leveled his eyes at her. I found out 6 months ago, right after your conference in Portland that got extended for weather delays. Except the storm never hit Portland. The airport didn't have record of your return flight. You came back from Denver. From his city. Her lips parted. Soundless. Doug didn't stop. You left a receipt in your coat pocket. Room service. Marriott downtown. 2 entrees. 1 tie, navy silk. Not mine. She stammered. It was a business dinner. Right. That's what I told myself for a week. Until I checked the company expense portal. You didn't submit it. She stood still now. Frozen mid-lie. Doug continued, calmer than he had any right to be. You were careful. Mostly. But you got sloppy when you got bold. You wanted out, but you wanted to win your way out. You needed me to be the boring husband, so your exit looked like evolution. He finally stepped forward, voice cool enough to cut marble. So I didn't leave. I let you deliver the final blow. I let you pick the words, the stage, the applause. I watched you hand me my own silence like it was a favor. Trish felt the room shift. Something inside her spine liquefied. You let me think I had control. Doug nodded. And in return, I took everything you actually wanted. Not the house. The narrative. I took your clean slate and rewrote it with ink you can't erase. She staggered back a step, like the confession was a shove to the chest. Her voice cracked. You could have just told me. We could have. I don't know. Talked. Yelled. Fought. That's what you wanted, he said. To be the wronged woman. The one who outgrew me. But I wasn't going to give you the drama. I gave you the mirror. She looked around the cabin like she was trying to find footing in a room where nothing was hers. Even the clock on the wall ticked in rhythm with his calm. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. Doug's face twitched. The smallest smirk, not of joy, but irony. You meant to replace me. You just didn't think I'd notice. Silence stretched again. Trish opened her mouth. Closed it. The lies wouldn't form anymore. Not with him staring straight through them like blueprint lines he'd already traced in pencil. She delivered the wound, but he'd planned the surgery. And now she was left with nothing to amputate but her illusions. It started with a video. No captions. No hashtags. Just Diane, walking through the house like a realtor with a score to settle. Her voice soft, measured. "Welcome to my new home," she said, standing on the same front porch where Trish once posed with a glass of wine and a fake laugh for her new chapter selfie. Diane didn't gloat, didn't name names. She just let the room speak. The entryway with the reclaimed wood bench Doug built himself. The kitchen island Trish had ordered from Italy. The living room with the fireplace mantel Doug restored by hand. Diane paused at every detail, ran her fingers along the walls like she could still feel the history in the grain. "This house has great bones," she said with a faint smile. "You can tell it was built by someone who cared." People noticed. Comments flooded in. "Wow, gorgeous space. Love the light. Didn't your sister used to live there? Wait, isn't this Trish's place?" And then came the text from Kate. "Is this real?" Trish had been dreading it. Their daughter had stayed neutral during the divorce, visibly uncomfortable, but silent. She hadn't picked sides. She'd just quietly split holidays, responded to both parents' texts with emojis and short phrases. But this time, there was no fence to sit on. Trish typed out a dozen explanations, each one worse than the last. Finally, she sent, "It's complicated. I'll explain everything when I see you." The reply came an hour later. "I already know. Dad told me. I don't want to see you right now." No punctuation, just the weight of a closed door. That night, Trish scrolled through Diane's video on mute, playing it again and again, watching herself disappear room by room. The worst part wasn't the ownership transfer or even the betrayal. It was how natural Diane looked in the space. Like the house had been waiting for her. Like Trish had just been staging it. Then came the second blow. Clint, the affair, the man she'd risked everything for, was tagged in a photo the next morning. Someone else's arm around him. A brunch plate. Smiling. Blonde. Trish stared at the photo, so long the screen dimmed. She texted him. No response. She tried again. Then called. "This number is no longer in service." By Thursday, the invitations stopped. No more girls' nights. No more charity mixers. Lisa said she was staying out of it, but her voice was different. Guarded, like Trish had become radioactive. Even her own garden mocked her. The peonies bloomed without her, captured in Diane's time-lapse post. Love watching things grow again. The walls around Trish didn't just close in, they stayed quiet. Too quiet. The condo she rented 2 towns over felt like a bad hotel lobby. No personality, no books, no warmth. Just cold light, neutral walls, and a silence that stretched long into the night. She caught herself calling it temporary. But even she didn't believe that anymore. For the first time in her curated, calculated adult life, Trish had nothing to curate. No stage to decorate. No applause to anticipate. Just her. Alone. Watching her fantasy become someone else's reality. And knowing the architect of that fall never even raised his voice. The house glowed like something out of a magazine shoot. Warm lights in every window, laughter spilling from the patio, jazz humming under the clink of crystal glasses. Lanterns dangled from the pergola Trish once demanded but never quite liked. Now it looked perfect. Effortless. Like it belonged to someone who understood balance. Across the street, hidden in the shadow of a sycamore tree, Trish stood alone. No makeup. No invitation. No one even knew she was there. Diane's housewarming party was the kind of event Trish used to host. Selective. Elegant. Just enough casual to look unplanned. Guests mingled in tailored jackets and summer dresses, sipping Prosecco she would have chosen herself. The new rug in the entryway, navy with ivory patterns, had been her pinned dream for months. She watched Doug arrive like a ghost entering his own cathedral. He looked lighter, slimmer, maybe. No tie. Rolled sleeves. He hugged Diane at the door and handed her a bottle wrapped in linen. They laughed, and she touched his arm like they'd known each other longer than anyone realized. He stepped inside, swallowed by the warm buzz of conversation and soft music. Trish didn't breathe for a full minute. She expected rage. Or bitterness. Or at least some flash of him being performative, cruel, theatrical. But no, he was just present, fully, peacefully done with her. Inside, glasses raised. Diane stood near the hearth, the same one Trish had once called too rustic, and tried to paint over. To clean slates, Diane said, voice bright and clear. And second chances. Doug raised his glass. No flourish. No smile for show. Across the street, Trish flinched like someone had slapped her through the glass. She thought maybe he'd look around. Search for her shadow. Sense her presence. Give her that flicker of acknowledgement that she still mattered. And he did look. Just once. Straight at her. Not past her. At her. But his face didn't change. He didn't smirk. Didn't pity. He just turned back to Diane. Trish felt something rupture then. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a deep, final shift inside her chest. Like the last screw in a structure coming loose. The kind of break you don't fix. You rebuild without it. She stood there for several minutes after the toast, long after Doug moved deeper into the crowd and laughter carried on without pause. Cars passed. No one noticed her. Not anymore. No house. No husband. No narrative. Only the cold air brushing her cheek, and the ache of poetic justice settling where her ego used to live. And Doug? He never looked back. Not once. The only thing colder than the air in the hallway was her face. I came in balancing a paper bag with the bottle still sweating inside it, half smiling already, because I thought maybe, just maybe, she remembered the date. Not our wedding anniversary. That was just paperwork. No, this was the date we actually meant something. The night we met. The night I thought she saw me. Brenda didn't look up. She was dressed like she was heading to a funeral in a city colder than ours. Her coat was zipped up. Her hair was tied back, tight like a noose around whatever emotion might have tried to escape from her. She wasn't waiting for me. She was waiting to leave. You're home late, she said without turning her head. Her eyes were fixed on the door, her hand still loosely gripping the handle of a navy blue suitcase, the one I bought her after her last business trip. I stopped for wine, I said, trying to inject something light into the atmosphere, like that ever worked before. She blinked slowly, then exhaled. I'm going to stay with Ryan for a while, she said, like she was reading off a recipe. A month. Maybe less. I need space. I need clarity. I blinked once. Then again. Ryan. Her ex. Not a friend. Not a therapist. Not her sister's house. Not a hotel. Not even the couch. Ryan. I didn't respond. Not out of shock. Not out of fear. I was measuring something. I was watching the scene fold open in front of me like a trick deck of cards, and I was trying to figure out when exactly the sleight of hand happened. When I stopped being part of this household and started being background noise. Then came the sound of bare feet slapping casually down the stairs. The true queen of sarcasm herself. Lily, 19. Dripping with that Gen Z smugness that thinks confidence is a birthright. She leaned against the stair rail like she was bored already and gave me a grin, so fake it should have come with a warning label. Mom, did you tell him? She said, feigning concern. Per Robert. She's just going to clear her head, you know. With her ex's help. Emotional support. In bed. Brenda didn't even flinch. Then Lily turned fully toward me, had tilted just enough to show she knew exactly where to twist the knife. You're not going to do anything, right? She said sweetly. You'll just wait here, like always. Heat up leftovers. Watch your shows. Maybe cry a little. You're good at pretending nothing's wrong. You've had years of practice. She laughed then. Actually laughed. Like this was entertainment. And that's when something quietly, without ceremony, shifted in me. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the wine. I didn't beg. But I did look at them. Really look. Brenda, who had carefully packed her essentials without any guilt whatsoever. And Lily, who was practically foaming at the mouth to see me roll over and accept it again, like some obedient old golden retriever who didn't understand why he wasn't allowed on the bed anymore. I nodded. Slowly. No smile. No twitch. No blinking. All right, I said, setting the wine on the hallway table. Enjoy your month. I walked past them like they were ghosts already. I didn't ask where Ryan lived. I didn't ask when she decided this. I didn't ask why she told Lily before she told me. Because I already knew something they didn't. This wasn't my collapse. This was my awakening. They had pushed the wrong man too many times. And for the first time in 10 years, I was wide awake. The house was dead silent, but my ears were ringing. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off. No dramatic lighting, no wine, no music. Just me, an old chair that creaked too loud, and the dull hum of the refrigerator. One of the only things in this place that ever pulled its weight. I didn't sleep. Didn't even try. I just sat there, staring through the dark, watching the last 10 years crawl back across the tile like rats in the walls. They didn't come all at once. They came as moments. Details. Rotten things I had buried under the concrete of compromise. Lily smirked when I paid her first semester tuition, and she walked out of the room without so much as a thank you. The time Brenda told me it was embarrassing how I talked about my job like it mattered, because apparently only six-figure salaries deserve enthusiasm. That night, I overheard Lily whisper to a friend on the phone, "He's not really my stepdad. He's just Mom's backup plan." Brenda knew. She always knew how Lily treated me. But her go-to response was to sigh like she was tired of hearing it and say, "She's young. She'll grow out of it." She didn't. She grew into it. Because in this house, respect wasn't earned or given. It was hoarded, and I was never handed a damn cent of it. And still, I paid the bills. I fixed the leaks. I picked Lily up from parties at 1 a.m. when her friends ditched her. I listened to Brenda's rants about her exes and coworkers like I was some unpaid therapist. I cooked on holidays. Took photos of them smiling for Instagram. I was the wallpaper in every family picture. I thought I was being noble. That pride was the enemy of peace. That being the man who stays quiet and holds the line made me a better husband. A better human. But pride wasn't the enemy. Pride was just waiting. Quietly. Patiently. In a corner of my soul I hadn't swept in years. And now it was standing up, stretching its limbs, and telling me we're back. Around 3:40 a.m., I heard footsteps upstairs. Lily, probably sneaking a snack, assuming she'd earned the right to ransack the fridge without asking. I didn't move. I waited until I heard the click of her bedroom door again. I stared at the ceiling for a moment longer, then got up and went to the drawer with the notepad. I started writing. Not in rage. Not in a panic. In clarity. Names. Accounts. Things I pay for that they forgot I controlled. Insurance. Utilities. Streaming services Lily would absolutely scream over. The car Brenda mostly drove that was still under my name. The card Lily used to buy those $18 coffees and emotional support candles. It was all coming back to me now, in beautiful, infuriating detail. At 5:12 a.m., Brenda came downstairs, rolling her suitcase over the hardwood like she owned the place. She stopped when she saw me sitting at the table. I didn't speak. I just looked up at her and waited for her to say something meaningful. She didn't. "Well," she finally offered, adjusting her coat like she was heading to brunch. "I'll text you when I get there." I tilted my head. "Enjoy your trip." Her lips twitched. Just slightly. Like she was confused by how easy that was. Maybe she thought I'd beg. Or cry. Or demand answers. But all she got was the sound of her suitcase wheels turning again as she pulled the door open. She left. And then came Lily. Not in a rush. Not even hiding it. She strutted down the stairs in her hoodie and shorts like she'd just been crowned queen of the house. "Guess it's just you and me now," she said, snatching a granola bar from the counter like it was her birthright. I said, turning the page in my notebook. She raised an eyebrow. "You're not gonna, like, spiral or something?" "Not today." She shrugged, amused, and went back upstairs. But I stayed there, unmoving, listening to the sound of that door closing again behind her. Not spiraling. Planning. And for the first time in a decade, the silence in that kitchen didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. The sun wasn't even up when I opened my eyes. No alarm. No groggy limbs. No weight on my chest. Just clarity, sharp, cold, perfect. I sat up in bed, felt the edge of the mattress under my fingers like it was the first time I'd really noticed it. The room looked different in that early gray light. Not emptier. Not lonelier. Just mine. I didn't linger. I got dressed. No music. No background noise. Just the quiet clicks of my keyboard as I walked into the home office and sat down. This was where I used to work late to give them space. where I stored backup drives and paid tuition and filled out tax returns nobody ever thanked me for. I booted up the computer, and then I started reclaiming. Bank accounts, mine. All primary holders. Brenda's name? Authorized user at best. Utilities? I paid every single one. Electric, gas, water, internet, trash. Lily's Spotify account was running through a bundle I negotiated 2 years ago when they mocked me for spending too much time on hold. Not anymore. Click. Remove. Click. Password changed. Click. Notifications turned off. Everything routed through my new private email. Two-factor authentication on everything. Text alerts rerouted. And just for the poetry of it, I canceled the Apple Family plan she used to sync her calendar with mine. There'd be no more shared reminders for dinner plans that never included me. I opened the drawer and pulled out the manila folder I hadn't touched in years. Deed to the house. Dated 2 years before I even met Brenda. She never asked whose name it was under. Maybe because deep down, she already knew. Maybe because she thought it didn't matter. That I wouldn't dare do anything with it. I scanned through every page. Then I paused. There it was. Section 4.1, Premarital Property, Designation of Exclusive Ownership. Signed. Witnessed. Notarized. The printer spat out 3 copies. One for the file, one for the lawyer, one just for fun. And then I made a call I hadn't made in over a decade. It rang twice. Marcus Law Office, a woman answered, chipper for 7:40 in the morning. Tell Carl Weaver that Robert Langley's calling, I said. He'll take it. A pause. A beat. Then, of course, one moment. Carl picked up sounding like he hadn't had his coffee yet. Robert. Well, damn. It's been what, 15 years? What's going on? I need some cleanup, I said. Some property affirmations. Contract reviews. And I want to talk about proactive protections. He chuckled. You always did phrase things like you were writing a deposition. What's the situation? A shift, I said. The kind that starts quiet and ends with the locks changed. He whistled low. All right. You want to come in? Tomorrow, I said. I'll bring everything. I ended the call, leaned back in the chair, and stared at the wall for a long time. Not angry. Not bitter. Resolved. I didn't want apologies. I didn't need explanations. What I needed was leverage. Clarity. Distance. The kind that came with airtight documentation and absolutely no emotional debris. By noon, I had closed or redirected every financial connection Brenda or Lily had access to. Insurance policies? Adjusted. Beneficiaries? Updated. Emergency contacts? Removed. This wasn't revenge. This was surgery. Precise. Bloodless. And irreversible. I didn't slam drawers or tear through closets. There was no music blasting, no dramatic storm of flying clothes. This wasn't a purge. It was an audit. I started in the bedroom. Brenda's side, meticulously arranged as always, as if perfection could mask contempt. Her perfume bottles lined up like trophies. Her jewelry box, still open from when she took the important pieces with her. She assumed the rest would wait here, like me. Wrong. I opened a new roll of packing tape and began filling the first box. Lotions, brushes, designer scarves she never wore but always mentioned when she wanted to sound cultured. Even the vase from her sister's wedding into the box. If she left pieces of herself scattered around hoping I'd trip over sentiment, I wasn't playing that game. The bathroom was next. Lily's shampoo that smelled like candy. Brenda's $90 age defense serum. Their entire mini pharmacy of products they both treated like sacred relics. Boxed. Labeled. Sealed. Every room became a map of subtle colonization. My name was on the mortgage, but the house had slowly filled with things that weren't mine. Bookshelves with novels they never read. Cookware neither of them used. Throw pillows with ironic quotes about family that now felt like bad jokes. Into the boxes. One by one. By the time I reached the hallway closet, my rhythm was flawless. Coats? Hers. Shoes? Definitely not mine. Lily's 5 different pairs of boots, each somehow more entitled than the last, gently packed. Not a scratch on them. I wanted them in perfect condition when they realized they were no longer welcome here. Then I went to the basement. The air changed. Cooler. Still. Like the walls themselves knew what I was down here for. In the far corner, behind the shelving unit with my old stereo system, sat the black storage box. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside, documents they had no idea I kept. Property taxes. Original home purchase agreement. Receipts for every renovation I paid for in full. Electrical rewiring, roof reinforcement, even the security system I installed 2 winters ago when Brenda claimed she heard someone outside. I pulled out the backup drive, plugged it into my laptop, navigated through the folders. Garage_cam_backup clicked. The garage camera. The one Brenda thought was just a dummy. The one Lily never knew existed because it wasn't synced to the app. It had its own local loop. Quiet. Private. Mine. Footage. Dozens of files. I didn't even need to watch most of them. I remembered setting it up more for peace of mind than anything else. But the past few months had a few clips worth saving. The kind of late-night returns and whispered conversations that could make timelines unravel. I copied the most interesting ones to a separate folder labeled Redundancy. Then I moved to the garage. That was Lily's temple. Her yoga mat still on the floor, like she'd levitate any minute. Her ring light in the corner for those passive-aggressive Instagram stories. The ones that sounded vague but always had just enough venom to sting someone specific. I packed it all. No anger. Just precision. By evening, the boxes were stacked in the front room. 22 in total. Everything labeled. Brenda, master bath. Lily, garage. Brenda, office. The house had never felt this light. I wasn't a husband. I wasn't a stepdad. I was a man with a plan. And I was just getting started. The law office was tucked inside a converted Victorian with too much charm and not enough insulation. The kind of place that tried to make contracts feel cozy. I parked across the street and sat in the car for a moment, watching the front door like I was casing the joint. It felt strange, walking into a place where your past decisions finally shook your hand and said, "Good job, old man." You saw it coming. The bell above the door jingled when I stepped inside. The receptionist looked up, startled, like no one ever showed up this early with a folder full of inevitability. "I'm here for Carl Weaver," I said, handing over my name. She scanned her schedule, blinked, then nodded quickly. "He's in already. Go ahead upstairs, second door on the right." Carl's office looked like something between a library and a war room. Shelves of leather-bound law books and framed degrees, but the desk was modern, matte black, sharp edges, organized to a fault. He was younger than I remembered. Maybe he'd traded coffee for kale juice, or maybe I'd just aged faster. But the handshake was firm, and the smile was real. "Robert Langley, you look like a man with unfinished business." I look like a man who's finally ready to finish it. He motioned for me to sit. I didn't. I pulled the folder from my bag and placed it on the desk. Inside, the marriage contract. Signed, witnessed, filed and forgotten. Until now. Carl opened it carefully, flipping through the pages like they were landmines. "You kept everything," he murmured. "Good. Very good." I pointed. "Page 12. Clause 17. He stopped. "Read it. Then read it again." I could see the shift in his expression, a subtle raise of the eyebrows, the lawyer version of a jaw hitting the floor. "In the event that one party voluntarily departs the marital residence for the purpose of residing with a former romantic partner." He trailed off, then looked up at me. "This clause gives you full claim to shared property if the departure meets that condition." Did she? She did, I said calmly. Her words. I didn't even have to prompt her. "I'm going to stay with my ex for a month." Direct quote. Carl let out a low whistle. This clause was her idea, if I remember right. I added. She was still mad at her last ex's new wife stealing her furniture. Wanted to be protected if things went bad. The irony is not lost on me. He leaned back, processing. She initiated departure. She's voluntarily residing with a former partner. She didn't request legal separation. She didn't file a temporary custody claim on the house. Nothing. He glanced through the rest of the file. "And you have financial documents showing your name on every major asset?" "Already organized," I said. "Labeled. Timestamped. 2 backups." He gave a short laugh. "Jesus, Robert. You came loaded for court." "No court. Not yet. I just want things airtight before she comes back pretending nothing happened." Carl nodded slowly. "All right. Here's what we do. We file a property affirmation under the marital clause. Quietly. No notice. Once that's submitted, She has no legal claim to contest ownership unless she wants to argue the clause itself, which she signed. And unless she's got a recording of you begging her to leave, she has zero leverage. I don't want to humiliate her, I said. Just neutralize her. Carl gave me a look. Robert, you're not going for blood. You're just making sure you're not the one bleeding this time. I finally sat down. There was no celebration, no triumphant music, just the steady weight of power sliding back across the table toward me. I had walked in as a ghost of myself. I walked out with the paperwork that would bury the version of me they thought they knew. The locksmith arrived exactly at 6 p.m. Punctual, quiet, no small talk, which I appreciated. I led him to the front door and simply said, "We're upgrading." He didn't ask why. Probably seen enough divorce houses and bad breakups to know when to keep things mechanical. The new locks were sleek, keyless, digital, set to randomized codes that I controlled from my phone. The old brass ones clinked as they hit the trash bin outside, along with the keys that had passed through too many careless hands. Brenda's key had a chipped purple tag with a heart on it. Lily's had glitter. They were tokens of access they no longer had. By the time the installation finished, the sun had dipped, casting long shadows across the freshly scrubbed floors. The boxes by the wall, 22, precisely labeled, waited like loyal soldiers ready to be deployed. I didn't move them. Not yet. Let them sit there. A visual reminder that this house had undergone a purge. I didn't send a text. I didn't leave a note. I didn't schedule a call to talk. That's what Brenda would have expected, a civilized breakdown. A polite emotional collapse she could roll her eyes at later. She once told me, half laughing, that the thing she admired most about me was how non-confrontational I was. Like it was a compliment. Like I was a well-trained pet. No more. I walked the halls now, not like a husband wandering the wreckage, but like an architect inspecting a structure he'd just redesigned. Everything was sharper, cleaner. Their clutter was gone. Her throw blankets, her eucalyptus candles, the passive-aggressive wall art Lily bought that said, "Live your truth," in cursive, all packed, sealed, and standing at attention. The dining table no longer bore the wine stain Brenda blamed on me for distracting her with irrelevant stories. The countertop didn't have Lily's avocado pits fossilizing in a half-cleaned bowl. The bathroom mirror didn't have her lipstick streaks and fog motivational quotes. The silence now was not the absence of life. It was the presence of mine. I passed the hallway mirror and caught my reflection. Not haggard. Not broken. I looked like someone who had just exhaled after holding his breath for 10 years. I poured a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window. The street outside was still, the porch light glowing with a quiet resolve. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a place I was tolerating. It felt like mine. Undisputed. Uncompromised. Unapologetic. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Brenda. "Hope things are okay. Just checking in." I didn't reply. Another buzz. "Lily says the thermostat app isn't working." I turned off notifications. Then, silence again. Not the tense, suffocating silence of a home filled with resentment. This was different. This was oxygen. And as I leaned back in the chair, feet planted, hands steady, a thought passed through my mind. Not loud, not dramatic, just calm and certain. I don't miss them. I'm breathing. The SUV pulled up at 2:04 p.m. on a Wednesday. Not a minute late. Of course, Brenda would arrive midweek, just in time to disrupt any rhythm I'd rebuilt. She stepped out in a beige trench coat like she was returning from a diplomatic mission. Sunglasses. Heels. That little sideways smile she wore when she thought she held all the cards. She didn't look tired. She didn't look torn. She looked pleased. Like her month-long escape with her ex had been a spa retreat, and now she was back to reclaim her quiet, obedient kingdom. I watched from the upstairs hallway, behind the curtain, completely still. Lily popped out of the passenger side, yanking her hoodie over her head like the sun was a personal insult. Her AirPods were in, naturally. Eyes locked on her phone. She didn't even look at the house, just walked straight up the path with the same entitlement she used to use on my bank account. Brenda, behind her, approached the front door with zero hesitation. She reached into her bag, pulled out her key with that familiar click, and stopped. Frowned. She twisted the key again. Slower. Then harder. Nothing. Her smile faltered for the first time. Click. 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 Still nothing. From the porch, Lily sighed without looking up. It's broken again, she groaned, pulling out a single AirPod. Seriously? This house is ancient. Brenda ignored her, now holding the door handle with both hands like she could intimidate it into obedience. She knocked. Lightly at first. Then again. Harder. Louder. More confident than the situation deserved. I didn't move. Then she rang the bell. Again. Then 5 more times in succession like she was summoning a butler. Still no answer. Robert, she called, voice rising. Robert, the lock's jammed or something, can you open the door? She waited. Nothing. Robert, open the door. Come on, what are you doing? Still nothing. She stepped back, scanned the windows. Her phone came out. She dialed. I watched it light up on my desk downstairs. Let it ring. Again. Voicemail. Another call. Ignored. Then came the fists. First light knocks. Then palms. Then full-on pounding. You're being ridiculous, she shouted. What is this? Some kind of tantrum? Lily had moved to sit on the porch step, still scrolling, still chewing gum. Mom, just call the app guy again or whatever. This is stupid. Brenda turned, exasperated. This isn't the app. It's him. And in that moment, I saw it, just for a second. Doubt. Not confusion. Not panic. Just the beginning of a realization. That the chessboard had shifted. That maybe I wasn't curled up behind the curtain waiting to forgive her. That maybe this wasn't her homecoming. Maybe this wasn't her home. She hit the door again. Robert, stop acting like a child. I stood upstairs, quiet as death, and let the queen keep knocking on the castle she no longer ruled. The email came an hour after Brenda's last failed attempt to reach me. It arrived in both their inboxes at 3:19 p.m. Subject line, closure. Brenda saw it first. She was still pacing outside the house, fingers trembling more from fury than fear. Lily, meanwhile, was slouched in the passenger seat, trying to find a Wi-Fi signal strong enough to re-upload a TikTok story she'd captioned, "Locked out of my own house, LOL." #BoomerDrama. Brenda opened the email and hit play without hesitation, assuming it was some groveling message or manipulative guilt trip. But the moment the video loaded, her body stiffened. It was me seated calmly in the living room, legs crossed, back straight. The space behind me was different. The couch was gone. So was her fake antique mirror. The room was redone in sharp, clean lines, modern, minimal, intentional. Every inch of the background screamed one thing. She no longer lives here. I began speaking, voice steady, deliberate. Hi, Brenda. Lily, if you're watching this, then you've probably noticed your keys don't work anymore. And that I've stopped answering calls. Good. That means the timing is perfect. Brenda's jaw tightened. Lily had leaned in now, eyes locked on the screen like a plot twist just dropped. You left, Brenda, to find clarity with your ex. That was your choice. You made it freely and clearly. You weren't pushed. You weren't driven away. You packed your things and left a husband behind without a single attempt at repair. I smiled in the video, just a flicker. Lily, you laughed. You told me I'd do nothing. That I'd wait. That I'd accept whatever I was handed. You've mocked me in my own house for years. Spent my money, used my name, and looked at me like I was the help. The camera angle shifted slightly as I leaned in, elbows on my knees. Here's what's changed. I held up a printed chart. Bank accounts, all itemized. Brenda's cards, canceled. Lily's recurring subscriptions, terminated. All household utilities, transferred to a new account under my name alone. All passwords changed. You'll also notice, I continued, your car no longer recognizes your Bluetooth connection. That's because the title's been reclaimed. Legally. Brenda, you were never on the documents. You just like to pretend. Brenda's face went pale. Lily's jaw actually dropped. I also submitted a legal property affirmation under our prenup, Clause 17. I'm sure you remember it, Brenda. The one you insisted on back when you were still paranoid about your ex taking your stuff. You walked out. You moved in with your former partner. That clause is now in effect. Everything in this house? It's mine. And legally, that's already been confirmed. I paused in the video, then added with almost clinical softness. I've also delivered every box containing your belongings to a storage unit across town. Here's the address. The address flashed on screen. Brenda took out her phone to jot it down with shaky fingers. Your names have been removed from everything. Insurance, emergency contacts, house access. You are, for all intents and purposes, strangers to this residence now. The camera lingered as I leaned back in the chair and smiled again. I don't hate you. I don't even resent you anymore. But I no longer feel obligated to be the doormat you two used to wipe your shoes on. I gave 10 years of my life to this family, and in return, I got used, dismissed, and laughed at. One final pause. That chapter is closed. Do not come back here. There is nothing left for you in this house. And as of now, nothing left of you in my life. The screen went black. The video ended. Brenda's hand slowly lowered from her phone. Her breath caught in her throat. Lily blinked and muttered, almost involuntarily, he made a freaking PowerPoint. But there was no joke in her voice. Just fear. Real, dawning, irreparable fear. The cruiser pulled up just after sunset. Brenda had made the call 30 minutes earlier, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. She was pacing again by then, rehearsing lines like a stage actress waiting for curtain. Lily sat cross-armed on the hood of the SUV, sullen, defeated, but too proud to admit the word evicted was beginning to feel uncomfortably accurate. When the officers stepped out, two of them, both in their 40s, both the kind of men who had seen enough domestic squabbles to know how to spot performance, they approached slow and steady, like they already suspected this was going to be a waste of time. Brenda launched into it before they even reached the porch. My husband changed the locks while I was away and locked me and my daughter out of our home. One officer raised an eyebrow. The other pulled out a small notepad but didn't write anything yet. Okay, said the taller one. And you live here full-time? Brenda straightened her spine. Yes. We've lived here for over a decade. You were away on vacation? He asked, tone still neutral. She faltered slightly. No, I was taking space. At a friend's place. A friend? Brenda hesitated. My ex-husband's. But that's irrelevant. This is my residence. Lily, from behind her, muttered under her breath, should have stayed another week. The officers exchanged a look. Then the front door opened, and I stepped out. No anger, no theater, just a folder in one hand and a printed packet in the other. Evening, officers, I said. Would you like to see the paperwork now, or after she's done explaining why she voluntarily moved out? They looked at each other again. Let's see what you've got. I handed them the deed first. My name, dated years before the marriage. No Brenda, no joint ownership. Property purchased in full in 2009, I said, before I met her. The title's never been updated. Next came the marriage agreement. Clause 17 highlighted, signed, witnessed. And she left voluntarily 31 days ago. I have text from her confirming it. Also an email stating she was going to stay with her ex to figure things out. The shorter officer took the contract, scanned it, and gave a low whistle. And the daughter? Never legally adopted. No tenancy agreement. She's 19, never paid rent, never signed anything. Her name's on no bills. She's not a tenant. She was a tolerated guest. Brenda's face was folding in on itself now. This is insane. You can't just kick us out. The taller officer turned toward her. Ma'am, he hasn't kicked you out. You left. He's presented legal proof of sole ownership, including prenuptial protections. He also claims your belongings have been returned in full. Is that correct? They're in a storage unit, I said, holding up the receipt and location. All cataloged. Nothing damaged. The officer nodded. I want to press charges. Brenda snapped, voice climbing. For what, exactly? The shorter one asked, flipping the contract closed. For locking me out of my home. It's not your home, he said simply. Not legally. Not anymore. She stood there, mouth slightly open, eyes beginning to sting. The mask cracking. Lily had gone silent. Still on the hood, now fully curled in on herself, hoodie pulled over her face like she was trying to disappear into the seams. The officers took a few more notes, then handed the documents back to me. If you feel there's been a violation, one of them said to Brenda, you're welcome to file a civil complaint. But based on what we've seen, Mr. Langley's well within his rights. There's no unlawful eviction here. They turned to go. And just before stepping off the porch, the taller one added, not unkindly. You really should have read the fine print, ma'am. The cruiser drove off into the dusk. Brenda stayed frozen in place. No more shouting. No more threats. Just the weight of consequences finally, undeniably, catching up. And I went back inside and locked my door behind me. The courthouse smelled like old air conditioning and coffee gone stale. The kind of place where people either beg or bluff. Brenda chose the latter. She showed up in a gray pantsuit that didn't quite hide the desperation in her posture. Her lawyer, a man with good hair and bad instincts, walked beside her like they'd already rehearsed the sympathy angle. She wore a solemn look, chin slightly lifted, like a woman carrying the burden of betrayal she had written herself out of. I sat 3 rows back, not in a hurry. Carl was already there, calm as a monk and twice as deadly. He had a folder in front of him thick with receipts, screenshots, and cold facts. No emotion, no drama, just the documentation of a life I'd been building while they laughed at me. We didn't speak as the clerk called us forward. Didn't need to. Brenda didn't look at me either. That would have required acknowledgement. And Brenda never acknowledged anything she couldn't control. Her lawyer opened first, claimed emotional coercion, claimed I had been vindictive, that Brenda had only briefly vacated the marital home, and was shocked to find herself effectively locked out of her life. Carl didn't interrupt. He just waited. And when the judge looked over with that quiet nod, he slid the folder across the bench like it was nothing. "Your Honor," he began, "here are travel confirmations showing the petitioner's 31-day stay at her former partner's residence. Not a hotel, not a retreat, not a temporary absence, an intentional relocation to a known ex-partner's home. Click. Boarding pass. Receipt. GPS logs. Additionally, here is a record of digital correspondence between the petitioner and the respondent in which she refers to her departure as a break to find clarity and confirms she will be living with said ex. There is no ambiguity here. Click. Emails. Texts. Screenshot with timestamps. And finally, here are timestamps from the in-garage security camera, date-stamped footage, showing the petitioner and her daughter removing items without consent or notice on the day prior to her departure. He paused, waited, then added quietly, "The camera, I might add, was legally installed and undisclosed for security purposes." Brenda's lawyer started to object, but the judge cut him off with a single raised hand. "You're telling me," the judge said slowly, turning his gaze on Brenda, "that you voluntarily left a home your husband legally owned prior to the marriage, moved in with a previous partner, and now want to claim division of that property?" Brenda shifted in her seat. Her lips parted like she was going to cry, or justify, or plead. Instead, nothing came. Not even Lily's trademark disdain could have bailed her out now. The judge closed the file, looked down, wrote something, then leaned back. "Petitioner has no legal grounds to claim division of assets clearly protected under the prenuptial agreement and confirmed by the chain of documentation presented." A beat of silence. Motion denied. Just like that. Her lawyer closed his folder slower than I expected. He knew. He'd lost the moment Carl opened his mouth. Brenda stared straight ahead, face unreadable. But I knew that look. It wasn't shock. It was the moment a magician realizes the audience had already seen the wires. I stood, adjusted my cuff, didn't say a word, didn't offer a glance, just turned and walked out of that courtroom with steady steps and clean hands. Behind me, the echo of silence. A silence she'd crafted herself, and now had to live in. The new apartment was smaller, but sharper. No unnecessary space. No dead corners collecting dust and drama. Just clean lines, warm wood floors, and a view of the city that reminded me, every morning, that the world outside wasn't hostile. It was just waiting for me to reclaim it. I didn't move out of fear. I moved out of precision. The house wasn't haunted, but it was saturated. With memories, with echoes, with fingerprints that weren't mine. So I left it behind like a snake sheds its skin. Kept the deed, of course. Locked and monitored. A mausoleum of poor choices and old expectations. The apartment was 10 minutes from the office. 15 from the gym I used to pay for, but never visit. Now I went every morning. Not out of vengeance. Just to see what else my body was capable of after years of quietly carrying things that were never mine to hold. I hired a designer. Young guy. brutally honest. Told me the entire color palette of my past furniture screamed middle-aged resignation. I told him I wanted steel, not soft. Earth tones, not beige. Bookshelves that looked like they had opinions. He understood immediately. The kitchen? Barely used. But I bought real knives. A proper coffee grinder. Ceramic mugs that didn't have inspirational quotes printed on them. The bedroom had no TV. No clutter. Just blackout curtains, a sound machine, and sheets I picked for comfort, not color coordination with anyone else's Pinterest board. And the mornings, God, the mornings were mine again. No voices behind closed doors. No slamming drawers. No Lily yelling at the internet router for ruining her life. No Brenda reading headlines out loud just to have someone confirm her outrage. Just peace. And silence. But this silence didn't ask me to explain myself. It let me be. Of course, the text came. Lily first. No apology, no humility. Just, hey, can you Venmo me $60 for books? My card isn't working. I stared at it for a minute. Then archived the thread. Brenda followed 2 days later. I think we should talk. Just for closure. I'm still confused by how things turned out. Closure? I had sent her the storage unit key, the legal notice, the video. The only thing left to close was her mouth. I left her on read. She tried again. Please. Just lunch. No pressure. I miss our talks. I didn't answer. I didn't block her either. I wanted her to see the gray bubble sit there. Unmoving. Unbothered. Final. Carl called a week later. Asked if I wanted to pursue damages or just let the silence do the work. I think it's done, I told him. The revenge wasn't the lock. Or the ruling. It was showing them I didn't need to say another word. I stepped out onto the balcony with a fresh cup of coffee, the city breathing below me. No screaming. No sarcasm. No apologies I didn't believe. Just air. Unfiltered. Unshared. Mine. It was just past 9 when I stepped onto the balcony, coffee in hand, the city lights humming below like a quiet applause I never asked for but finally understood. The air was cool. Crisp. Clean in a way no house full of smirks and sighs could ever offer. I sat down slowly, not from age or fatigue, but from the rare luxury of having nowhere to rush. No one to tolerate. Nothing to brace for. My phone buzzed once. Just once. I didn't need to check it, but I did. Security alert. Attempted login to inactive shared account. Access denied. I tapped the screen. Location. Old residence. User. Brenda_L. Of course. I stared at the message for a few seconds longer than I needed to. Then I put the phone down. My eyes drifted to the smart lock installed just days ago on the door behind me, sleek, silent, unbreakable. Like the new life I'd built. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I smiled. Small. Real. Lasting. She tried the old code. I whispered to no one, my voice barely louder than the steam rising from the mug. You're locked out, Brenda. From the door. From the files. From me. I leaned back in the chair, one leg crossed over the other, eyes half closed. Not just the house, I murmured, with a smirk. You're locked out of everything. Then, nothing. No knocks. No texts. No tension. Just the sound of wind brushing the balcony rail. And silence. The kind that didn't need permission. The kind that didn't have conditions. The kind that meant one thing. Freedom. She said it between bites of shrimp and laughter that wasn't hers. Thomas can stay or go. I don't care, Karen announced, waving her hand like she was swatting a gnat, as if my entire existence was background noise at her curated little soiree. The room laughed. Not loudly, not maniacally, no, it was worse. That tight, smug chuckle people make when they think they're in on something. Her tennis friends, sipping overpriced wine they didn't pay for, looked at me like I was the odd piece of furniture no one knew where to place. Her book club ladies, self-declared experts in emotional intelligence, traded glances over their glasses. One of them, Dana, even raised an eyebrow at me. Pity or glee, I couldn't tell. I just put my fork down. Not hard. Not loud. Just slow. Quiet. My knuckles didn't even tense. I looked at my plate, a salmon Karen made only because Brian loves it done this way than at her. She wasn't looking at me. Of course she wasn't. She was topping off her wine, laughing at something Dana mumbled. Something about midlife liberation. I felt nothing. That's the part one remember most clearly. Not the sting, not the betrayal, just the vacuum. Like a switch was thrown and the power inside me cut out, only to reboot into something colder, calmer, meaner. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. I caught the clock on the wall behind her, 7:42 p.m. A Thursday. Funny the things you log in moments like that. Like you know it's going to matter later. I stood. Karen didn't notice. Or maybe she did, and just didn't think I would leave. She's used to me staying, swallowing, smoothing it over. That was our unspoken agreement. She gets to perform. I get to endure. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. I walked past the dining room and into the kitchen. Picked up my keys. Jacket. The mail sitting by the fruit bowl. One envelope had my name on it. An insurance premium, probably. I took that too. Then I walked to the door. Just before I stepped out, I heard her voice again. "Oh, please," she called from the table, a little too loudly, her voice brittle with performance. "Don't be dramatic, Thomas." Dramatic? I didn't slam the door. I didn't say a word. I just left. Slipped into the night like vapor. The cool air hit me like a verdict. The house behind me lit up like a showroom, laughter echoing into the quiet cul-de-sac. I stood in the driveway for a second. My truck looked tired, like it shared my fatigue. I opened the door, got in, and drove. No destination, just movement. A mechanical escape. It wasn't until I reached the edge of town that I let myself smile. Just a flicker. A ghost of one. Because while Karen sipped her wine and soaked in the applause, she had no idea that what she'd just done was hand me permission. The kind I'd been waiting for. No yelling. No accusations. No messy theatrics. Just clarity. I pulled into the lot of a 24-hour diner, ordered a black coffee, and took out my phone. Scrolled to a folder labeled for later. Screenshots. Notes. Photos. Things I'd kept to myself, never planning to use until now. There was a photo of Karen in Tahoe, supposedly a girls-only retreat. But there was Brian in the background, reflection of her sunglasses. His watch. His hand. His stupidity. I sipped my coffee and tapped the photo. Saved. Archived. No, I wasn't dramatic. I was precise. And Karen had just started a play she didn't know I'd been scripting the finale of. Her line was improvised. Mine was written in stone. She started calling my woodworking adorable. That was the first shift I noticed. Not impressive, not skilled, adorable. Like a toddler's drawing pin to a fridge. I'd build her an entire breakfast nook out of reclaimed oak, custom fit to her Pinterest fantasy. She walked in, glanced at it, and said, "Well, aren't you the little craftsman?" Little. Craftsman. Like I was a guy who glued popsicle sticks together in the garage to feel useful. It stung, sure. But I said nothing. Just nodded and let her pour herself a glass of whatever wine was in fashion that week. The next shift came when she booked a trip to Asheville. Just announced it. "Me and the girls are going hiking," she said, already packing her Athleta leggings. No ask. No, would you like to come? Just dates. Departure. Silence. And when she got back, she smelled different. Not perfume. Something more chemical. Like hotel-grade shampoo and unfamiliar laundry soap. There was a scratch on her collarbone that didn't come from yoga. Still, I said nothing. A few weeks later, a package showed up. Karen had ordered a smart refrigerator without telling me. Said the old one didn't match her aesthetic. I stared at the receipt on the counter. $3, $849.99. No heads up. No discussion. That night, I started a spreadsheet. Karen expenses. I titled it with a smile. Every unapproved purchase. Every suspicious charge. Plane tickets. Uber rides that didn't line up with her calendar. It was the kind of thing I used to do for my clients when I worked supply chain logistics, track inconsistencies. Identify bleed. One morning, I caught her texting under the table. She tilted the screen away when I passed behind her, then laughed out loud to no one. I stood in the doorway and just watched her for a second. She didn't even notice. Or maybe she didn't care. I asked, "Who's Brian again?" She didn't blink. Just said, "An old friend from college. We're catching up. He's going through a divorce, poor thing." "Uh-huh," I said, walking away. Brian had started popping up in her stories. "Brian says I should try acupuncture." Brian says intermittent fasting works wonders. Brian's wife was apparently awful to him. That one stuck with me. I found an old Christmas card buried in one of her keepsake boxes. From before we were married. To my forever muse, it said, in handwriting I didn't recognize. Signed, Brian, 1994. Muse. I scanned it and saved a copy. What followed was slow, methodical detachment. I stopped asking questions. Started watching. Not paranoid, just attentive. Like a man in a burning house who smells the smoke and begins checking exits while smiling through dinner. When she forgot, our anniversary dinner, I didn't mention it. Just logged the date. When she left me off the RSVP for her book club's wine night, I didn't argue. I checked the guest list on the counter, casually snapped a picture. She thought she was winning. That was the funny part. Karen thought her passive jabs were invisible. Like slow gas leaking into her room, she figured I'd either suffocate or not notice until it was too late. But I noticed. I noticed when she changed her phone passcode after 11 years of openness. I noticed when her phone bill suddenly included data spikes at 2 a.m. I noticed when the password to our shared cloud drive suddenly didn't work for me. I bought a pocket-sized notebook and started writing things down like a man preparing a deposition, not a diary. I didn't need to know everything. Just enough. Enough to remind her that while she was playing checkers with Brian the enlightened divorcee, I'd been playing chess with knives. I wasn't supposed to hear it. That's the part that made it worse. It was a Saturday. One of those late spring afternoons when the sunlight stretches long over the pavement and everything feels slower, warmer, quieter. I had just pulled into the driveway after grabbing mulch from the hardware store. Karen had decided the front lawn lacked curb appeal. God forbid the azaleas weren't blooming in symmetrical shame. I cut the engine and sat in the truck for a second. Windows down. Just enough breeze to make me linger. That's when I heard her voice. She was on the patio, sitting with her friend Leslie, the chain-smoking one with the voice like sandpaper and a face that always looked like it smelled something unpleasant. They hadn't noticed my truck. It was hidden by the hedge I planted last fall. Funny how your own yard can turn into a blind spot. Leslie said something I couldn't quite catch, something sharp and smirking. Karen laughed, low, bored, and said, I'm just waiting for the right moment. I married down, and I know it. No hesitation. No whisper. No shame. Just air. My ears rang. Not because it hurt. Not yet. Because it rang true. I didn't flinch. I didn't get out. I just stared at the steering wheel and felt something snap in a very, very quiet way. Like a joint dislocating, not enough to scream, just enough to never sit right again. Married down. I drove off. Left the mulch in the bed of the truck and took the long way out of the neighborhood. I passed the high school where our daughter used to play violin. The park where Karen once asked me to dance in the rain. That was before she started doing her nails in silence while I talked. Before Brian. An hour later, I was parked behind the library, using their free Wi-Fi. I opened my old email archives. Karen never really cleaned out her inbox. She treated email like a landfill, just dump and forget. And because she never changed her passwords, and because I'd once helped her recover her login after a spa trip where she forgot everything except the price of the wine, well, let's just say I still had access. I wasn't expecting love letters. I was expecting patterns. And I found them. May 3rd, she told me she was in Cincinnati for a conference. Brian had emailed her concert tickets for a venue in Asheville that same night. She responded, can't wait. Should I bring the red dress? Winky face. June 14th, she sent a photo to Brian, captioned, wish you were here. Same day I had surgery. She never showed. Said her car broke down. I kept digging, cross-referencing our credit card statements with her travel calendar. I found a hotel booking she made under the name K. Wallace, her maiden name. Booked for 2 guests. Brian's hometown. Every confirmation email. Every lie wrapped in a smile. It wasn't about catching her anymore. It was about cataloging her. I clicked save on a folder labeled Karen for later. Then I created another folder, exit plan. Because I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to confront. She didn't deserve that scene. No. She deserved precision. I left the library just before closing. Walked past the old Vietnam vet at the chess table out front. He nodded at me. I nodded back. 2 men who'd both seen enough betrayal in silence. When I got home, the mulch was still in the truck. Karen didn't ask why. She just said, Dinner's cold, without looking up from her phone. I replied, so's the marriage, and walked right past her. She didn't catch it. She never does. Joel never liked me much. Karen's younger brother always gave off that mild, simmering energy of a guy who thought his sister had married below her station, though to be fair, in his mind that station was probably a yacht off the Amalfi Coast, and I was the tugboat back in Indiana. Still, he'd never been rude. Just distant. Polite the way a bank is polite while declining your loan. So when he texted me out of the blue, "You around tonight? Need to talk." Just you. I almost ignored it. But something in me stirred. Call it instinct. Or maybe that cold awareness that had started setting up shop in my bones since the day Karen said I could stay or go. We sat out back. No music. No TV. Just 2 lawn chairs, 2 beers, and the rhythmic chirp of June bugs under the porch light. I cracked mine open and waited. Joel took a long swig, wiped his mouth, and stared ahead. "She doesn't know I'm here," he said. I didn't answer. Just waited. He sighed. "Look, Tom, I'm not great at this, but I figured you should know. She's been talking. Bragging, actually. At parties. Little lunches. You know, the wine mom gatherings where they pretend they're all CEOs of something." He tapped the bottle against his thigh. "She told Leslie, you know, that human cigarette, that she's just biding time, waiting to get free of the dead weight. Said it like a joke, but not really." I didn't blink. "She said once you're out of the picture, she's redoing the house. With Brian. That they've been planning it together for months." My grip on the bottle tightened, but I didn't speak. Joel turned to me. "I'm only telling you because, well, you never deserved that. And frankly, it's gotten ugly. She thinks she's invincible now. She's treating you like an expired lease." I nodded. Just once. Not surprised. Just done being naive. He leaned forward, squinting like he was bracing for a punch. "Aren't you pissed?" I tilted my head. "You ever seen a controlled demolition, Joel?" He blinked. Yeah. Ever notice how quiet it is before it drops? All that tension, then boom, precision. Nothing random. Just collapse where you want it." Joel looked at me like he wasn't sure if I was joking or confessing to something bigger. "I appreciate you telling me," I said, standing up. "Really?" He stayed seated. "You gonna confront her?" "No," I said, walking toward the porch door. "I'm gonna let her keep digging. She thinks the dirt's beneath her. She doesn't realize she's waist deep in it already." Inside, the house was quiet. Karen was upstairs, no doubt on her nightly guided meditation call, which I'm fairly certain was Brian whispering sweet nothings about backsplash tile. I passed by the living room and glanced at the wall. A photo hung crooked, our last vacation. I remember now, she smiled more in photos than in real life. I walked to the study, turned on the desk lamp, and opened a drawer. Inside was a thumb drive, labeled Karen_Daho.wave. Audio clip. Recorded 3 months ago. She was drunk, ranting on the patio to Leslie. If Thomas knew half of what Brian and I have planned, he'd have a stroke. But he's too busy playing Mr. Fix-It in the garage. Bless him. I clicked it. Listened once. Twice. Saved it to a hidden folder titled Fireworks. Then I emailed my lawyer, subject line, initiate discreet review. I didn't tell Karen Joel had visited. I didn't say a word. But when I brought her coffee the next morning, I made sure to use the world's best wife mug. She smiled at it smugly. Clueless. Like a condemned building thinking the rumble beneath it is just thunder. It started with $3,000. Vanished from the joint account without a whisper. I noticed it the same way I notice most things now, quietly. Saturday morning, coffee in hand, pretending to scroll news on my tablet while actually watching every cent move in our online banking. I'd gotten into the habit of exporting statements every week. I kept them in a folder named Budget Review. But the only one reviewing it was me, and I wasn't looking for balance. She came downstairs an hour later in her new Lululemon gear, acting like she'd just come back from solving climate change with Downward Dog. "Morning," I said, not looking up. She hummed, distracted. Then added, "Oh, I took care of the deposit for the kitchen remodel. Brian knows a guy who does great tile work." I didn't flinch. "I see." She sipped her matcha like it made her better than coffee. "He said those subway tiles you like are outdated. We're going with a waterfall quartz. Modern, minimal, chic." I nodded. "Brian's an expert on stone, huh?" She didn't hear the venom under the syrup. He's just helpful, she said, already texting. Has vision. Right. Vision. Like a raccoon in your attic has vision. Later that day, she accidentally left her Pinterest board open on the living room TV when she cast from her phone. A whole file labeled Post-Thomas Upgrade. Swear to God. Bathroom Reno. New patio furniture. A goddamn koi pond. I scrolled through it when she was in the shower. Buried among the pins was a note. Florida property listings close to mom. Near beach. The kicker? It was bookmarked on a shared account, labeled options when free. Not if. When. 2 days later, she floated the idea like it had just sprung from her mind. Have you ever thought about Florida? She asked. Warm winters, nice people, cheaper taxes. Might suit you. Retirement's coming up, after all. I blinked at her. For me? Or for us? She shrugged. I mean, do we really need to do everything together? Ah, there it was. A new philosophy. Rebranding detachment as enlightenment. I didn't argue. I just stood, poured myself another cup of coffee, and opened the junk drawer. Pulled out the letter I'd been holding on to, the one from the post office. 3 months earlier, I applied for a P.O. box under my initials only. Kept the key on a separate ring. That day, I finally used it. I drove down to the station and handed over the form. The clerk looked bored. Stamped it. Gave me my box number. Just another man in line rearranging his escape without fanfare. On the way back, I stopped by a copy shop and printed 20 pages, account statements, emails, screenshots of Karen's pins, and a quote from Brian's contractor buddy who, by the way, had no idea Karen was married. Said Karen Wallace sounded single to him. Funny how she resurrected her maiden name whenever it suited the script. I slid the papers into a file folder labeled Phase 1. From that moment on, every smile I gave her was a mask. Every sure, babe, was a receipt. Every nod was a nail in the quiet little coffin she was building for herself. She thought she was getting ahead, that I was too slow, too old, too stuck in my ways. She didn't understand. A man who's slow to speak isn't always stupid. Sometimes he's just building a dam, one that bursts exactly when he wants it to. I started redirecting my mail. First, the boring stuff, car insurance, hobby catalogs, tax reminders. Then came the big ones, legal correspondence, bank notifications, the trust paperwork. All to a little box with a brass key and a number no one else knew. It fit neatly in my pocket, just like the plan was starting to fit neatly in my hands. The attorney's office was 3 towns over, tucked between a nail salon and a failing yoga studio in a strip mall with cracked pavement. Not the sort of place Karen or her circle would ever bother noticing exactly why I chose it. Linda Kessler didn't wear a pantsuit or perfume. She wore jeans, a gray cardigan, and a poker face that hadn't cracked in years. Her handshake was dry and brief. Her tone didn't waver when I said, I'd like to prepare for a quiet exit. No fireworks. Just clean cuts and airtight silence. She glanced up, eyes scanning me like an X-ray machine in human form. How long have you been gathering material? 7 months, I said. Give or take. She leaned back. Then we're already ahead. Over the next hour, we mapped out the skeleton of something Karen never dreamed I was capable of, precision. I moved the bulk of my personal savings into a private trust under my parents' surname, old, forgotten money from a side business she never cared to ask about. She thought all I had was the joint account and a 401k she planned to drain when the time came. She never even asked what Foster and Sons meant when I logged expenses. Probably thought it was a hardware store. It wasn't. Linda walked me through options, asset protection, strategic dissociation, contingencies in case she tried to play victim. If she gets aggressive, we'll already be sitting on a stack of documentation. That's her shield. But if she plays it cool, we tighten the noose until she calls it a necklace. I liked her. I opened my laptop that night like a surgeon before the first cut. No hesitation now, just gloves, scalpel, method. I sorted every screenshot by date and subject. Subfolders titled Emotional Cruelty, Financial Manipulation, Infidelity Indicators, and the always popular Brian. There was the Venmo transaction labeled Wineglass, Wineglass, Wineglass. You earned it face-blowing kiss. On the same day, she told me she was at her mother's house, helping with arthritis meds. There were 3 Uber receipts from 11 p.m. pickups. None from our address. None with my name. There was a voicemail. I hadn't planned to record it. My phone was on the nightstand, but the mic caught it anyway. Karen in the living room, wine-slicked voice and brittle laughter. He's like a houseplant. Just needs sunlight and attention once a week. I've outgrown that. Brian makes me feel alive. Click. Saved. There was the Home Depot receipt signed K. Wallace, dated 2 weeks after we agreed not to start any major projects. She bought $620 in tile and grout. Brian's contractor had apparently already started. In the garage, I set up a small safe. Not fireproof, not fancy. Just functional. Inside, 2 USB sticks, 1 hard drive, and printed backups. I labeled the folders with plain names, just in case. Invoices. Workshop notes. Trip logs. Nobody checks workshop notes. On her next girl's night out, I installed a discreet mic under the kitchen island. Not because I wanted more dirt, but because she kept handing it out. The next recording captured her and Leslie again. This time with Karen bragging about how she'd timed the divorce just right after the new kitchen's done, but before Tom gets smart. I almost laughed out loud. She really thought I'd be standing there holding a level while she packed bags for 2. I uploaded the audio, timestamped it, labeled it, Kitchen Assumptions. There was nothing dramatic. No late-night confrontations. No smashed glasses. No yelling. Just the click of keys, the quiet shuffle of paper, the hum of slow war. Every night I went to bed beside her, pretending to be the clueless husband. She'd snore faintly, content. I'd stare at the ceiling, wondering how long she'd keep tightening the rope before realizing it was around her neck. Somewhere along the way, the pain had stopped, and the calculations had taken over. It happened over lamb chops and roasted squash. Karen had invited the same rotating cast of enablers she always did, Dana, Leslie, that smirking pseudo-intellectual from the tennis club who wore scarves indoors. Everyone with perfect veneers and hollow eyes. The wine was organic. The opinions, less so. I was halfway through chewing when she dropped it. For God's sake, Thomas, she said, loud enough to override the jazz in the background, if you're so miserable, why don't you just leave? It wasn't a question. It was a dare. A command dressed in exhaustion, meant to humiliate. The room went silent. Leslie looked down at her plate. Dana took a slow sip, eyes flicking from Karen to me. That scarfed idiot chuckled like he thought it was part of some performance art. I set down my knife. Not quickly. Not angrily. Just deliberately, like it had become too heavy to hold. I folded my napkin and placed it on the table. My plate was still half full. I didn't look at her. I didn't scan the room. I didn't give them the satisfaction of eye contact. I just stood up and walked out. Out of the dining room. Out of the house. Out of the life I had maintained for 24 years with duct tape and denial. No suitcase. No speech. No goodbye. The air outside was brisk. A faint smell of jasmine from the neighbor's yard drifted in like a final joke. My truck sat where it always did, loyal, quiet, ready. I got in, turned the key, and left. No plan, no GPS. Just drive. Past the church we never went to anymore. Past the gas station where I once bought her flowers on a whim. Past the dog park where we used to pretend we were ready for children. At some point, I realized I'd crossed county lines. I pulled over at a diner to piss and grabbed a coffee out of habit. Sat in a booth by the window and stared at my reflection, older, sure, but somehow less haunted already. I took out my phone and tapped a folder titled Escape Hatch. Inside was everything I needed. A digital list of motels and cabins I'd scouted weeks ago. Places with no memories. No history. No Karen. I picked a cabin in a sleepy little town 2 counties over. It was advertised as modest and private. That was all I needed. I paid in cash. The woman at the front desk didn't ask questions. Just handed me the key and said, "Firewood's out back." No loud music. "I'm not here to celebrate," I said. Room 7 smelled faintly of cedar and mothballs. 1 twin bed. A kitchenette. A cracked mirror. No Wi-Fi. Perfect. I dropped onto the bed and exhaled for what felt like the first time in a decade. Not relief. Not peace. Just absence. Of her voice, of her perfume, of the invisible leash she thought I'd never notice. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I stared at the wood-paneled ceiling and counted the cracks. By morning, she still hadn't texted. She wouldn't. Not yet. She had guests to entertain. A narrative to preserve. Let them think I'd stomp back in with flowers and regret. I opened my laptop and sent a single email to Linda Kessler. Subject: Stage 2. I poured myself burnt coffee from the percolator and stepped outside. The trees were loud with birds. Somewhere in the distance, a chainsaw hummed. The world didn't end because I left. It just got a little quieter. And a whole lot clearer. Karen wasted no time rewriting the narrative. By the time I was boiling eggs in a tin pot on the cabin stovetop, she was already hosting brunch. Word got back to me through Joel. Apparently, she told everyone at Leslie's pool party that I'd finally grown a spine and walked away, like I was a feral cat she'd been feeding out of guilt. He finally left, she told them, tossing her hair. Took him long enough. That was her version. That I was the dead weight. That she had been patient. Within a week, she replaced the framed photo of us in the living room with one of her and the dog. Not our dog, hers. I'd seen it on her Instagram. Captioned, Chapter 2 starts with who really matters. And then, of course, came Brian. First, it was the subtle signs. A second toothbrush in the master bath. 2 glasses of wine on the nightstand. A pair of aviators left carelessly on the kitchen counter. She stopped hiding it. Brian started showing up in selfies. On the deck. In the kitchen. Once, in the exact spot where our anniversary photo used to hang. Shirt half unbuttoned like he was allergic to self-respect. She posted a story of them clinking glasses under string lights in the backyard. Soft jazz in the background. Caption: New beginnings taste better with wine. I watched it from my burner account and sipped my gas station coffee. Then came the kicker. Karen sent out digital invites to a new chapter garden gathering. Polished font, champagne border, RSVP required. Guests were encouraged to bring positive energy, bold stories, and an appetite for liberation. Liberation? From what? A man who paid the mortgage? Who changed the damn HVAC filter? Who built her a cedar closet by hand when she said Pottery Barn didn't carry the right tone of wood? She titled the invite, From Withered to Wild, a Backyard Rebirth. That's not satire. That's real. Joel forwarded it to me with a single line. You'll want to see this. The guest list looked like a who's who of people I'd replaced 1,000 light bulbs for. People who smiled at me during barbecues, clapped when Karen toasted the man who keeps it all running, then quietly deleted me the second I stopped pouring the drinks. They were all going. Every smug one of them. Brian, too. He'd be there, glass in hand, probably wearing something linen and pretending he had depth. But here's the thing. Not everyone was clapping. Joel told me Dana pulled him aside at brunch and asked, Does she realize how this looks? I mean, isn't it a little fast? Leslie apparently made a joke about Karen installing a revolving door. Even Scarf Boy, the one who laughed when she told me to leave, had the nerve to whisper something about bad optics. It was starting to fray. Slowly. Quietly. The edges of her little fantasy quilt unraveling stitch by stitch. Because confidence, when forced, has a smell. Karen walked around in it like expensive perfume. But it reeked of desperation. Of someone performing happiness like it was an audition. Every toast, every curated post, every hashtagged caption screamed not freedom, but fear. Fear that I might not come crawling back. Fear that the audience might stop clapping. Fear that the man she replaced me with might just be the mirror she deserves. She thought I was licking wounds in some bar. I was sharpening knives in silence. The folder was navy blue, leather-bound. No label, no decoration, just clean edges and weight. Inside it, everything. Not everything she'd done. Everything I needed her to see. The contents were surgical. First section, financial records. Withdrawals from our joint account lined up against receipts from Brian's favorite wine bar. Cash transfers labeled consulting to a man who hadn't held a job in 5 years. The kitchen remodel, invoices billed to her maiden name, signed by Brian himself, and paid using our equity line of credit. Second section, recordings. Printed transcriptions, timestamped and notarized. My lawyer handled that part. We both agreed, emotion is temporary, but paper leaves scars. Third section, photo evidence. Not scandalous. Not dramatic. Just telling. Karen and Brian at a farmer's market, holding hands like high schoolers. Her in Brian's driveway at midnight, 3 consecutive weekends. Brian wearing my college hoodie and a picture from her story, casually tagged as hashtag Sunday mornings. Each image chosen not for shock, but for message. I saw you. I see you still. Then came the last section. The letter. Typed. 1 page. No anger. No pleading. Just a surgical goodbye. Karen, you said once I lacked imagination. You were right. For 24 years, I couldn't imagine you lying. We're spending months engineering my replacement while I still held the door open for you. I couldn't imagine you mocking me to your friends, whispering about deadweight, while I built the foundation you stood on. But I've learned. So now I ask you to imagine. A life where every illusion you built crumbles at once. Where the party ends mid-toast. Where the people who once smiled at your clever cruelty suddenly shift in their seats. By the time you read this, the trust will be irrevocable. The account split. The paperwork filed. The mask removed. No fight. No noise. Just the truth. Enjoy your chapter. T. I slipped the letter into the final page protector. Sealed the folder. It wasn't rage that filled me. Not even satisfaction. It was stillness. I didn't want her back. I didn't want her destroyed. I wanted her seen for once, truly seen for what she'd become. Let her smile through wine and denial. Let her joke about reclaiming her life. Let her pour rose into tulip glasses and pretend she was reborn. This package would arrive in the middle of it all. I walked it into the post office myself. No courier. No assistant. No trail. I chose priority delivery. 2-day window. Scheduled to land exactly 30 minutes into her backyard rebirth. I even asked the clerk, casually, think it'll make it in time for a Sunday noon drop? She looked up. Should. Weather's clear. Perfect. I watched her stamp it. Watched the folder disappear into the bin behind the counter. Watched the lid shut like a guillotine. Back in the truck, I sat for a long moment. Then, for the first time in months, I deleted the folder from my laptop. Not because I was done. Because she wasn't ready. But the clock had started ticking, and she'd hear it loudest when the laughter stopped. The string lights swayed gently over Karen's backyard like smug halos. The party was in full bloom. White wine, curated playlists, women in linen, and Brian in some wrinkled pastel button-down, trying too hard not to sweat. Laughter floated up like bubbles in Prosecco. The sound of people pretending everything was perfect while standing ankle-deep in delusion. Karen was radiant in her new sundress. Yellow, floral, a little too tight at the ribs. She twirled through conversations like she was hosting a talk show, pausing only to refill drinks and flash that practiced smile she wore when she needed applause more than air. This, she said, holding her glass aloft, is what new beginnings look like. Applause. Chuckles. Dana raised her glass. Leslie was already halfway drunk, slurring something about freedom and patio heaters. And then, at exactly 12:34 p.m., the courier arrived. He wasn't dramatic. Just a man doing his job. Brown uniform. Neutral expression. Envelope in hand. For Mrs. Wallace, he said. Karen, flushed and tipsy, beamed. Oh, is this a surprise? She sang, cradling it like a bouquet. Brian, did you? Brian shrugged. Not me. Probably one of your clients. She stood dead center in the garden, surrounded by friends, ego, and the illusion of untouchability. She peeled the envelope open with theatrical flair. The smile held for a second, then faltered. Her fingers fumbled as she flipped through the contents, at first confused, then pale, then bloodless. Audio transcript on top. Timestamps. Her own voice, laughing. Next page. Credit card statements. Then, screenshots. Photos. Her signature on a tile invoice. Then, the letter. She read the first paragraph. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. By the time she got to the final line, her hand started to shake. Brian leaned in. Babe, what is it? She let out a noise that wasn't a word. More like a short, startled gasp. Then silence. Then, she screamed. Not rage. Not pain. Something worse. Exposure. It tore through the backyard like a glass shattering on tile. Everyone froze. Dana clutched her purse like it might protect her. Leslie blinked 3 times, mouth slightly open. The tennis club guy set his wine down and took a slow, instinctual step away. Brian reached for the folder. Let me see. But she jerked it away like it burned. She screamed again, this time with a tremble in it. Hee. No one moved to help her. One of the younger women excused herself and left. Quietly. No eye contact. The package lay at her feet, splayed open like a corpse. Trust details. Legal forms. A single copy of the divorce petition on top, neatly folded, already filed, and parked exactly one street over, behind a hedge of blooming rhododendrons. I sat in my truck. Windows down, radio off. I could hear it all. Karen, unraveling in real time. The sudden, violent collapse of the script she thought she'd written in stone. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Because justice, when delivered cold, isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It just arrives on time. In the middle of your garden party. Wearing brown. Holding the end of the story you thought was yours to write. And it leaves you screaming while everyone else quietly steps away. The steak was cold. Not just room temperature, refrigerator cold. Like she'd plated it straight from a plastic container, without even pretending to care. Claire sat across from me in that linen blouse she always wore when she wanted to look graceful but firm. Her wrists perfectly aligned with the edges of the table. A manila envelope rested between us like a corpse. She didn't wait long. My lawyer made sure of it, she said, voice flat like we were negotiating the sale of a used Honda. You'll walk away with nothing. I looked at her. Not at the documents. Not at her smug little smile. At her. The same woman who once cried on our bathroom floor after a miscarriage. Who once painted my office in that hideous ocean blue because she thought it looked more creative. Who used to wait up for me just to smell my jacket and say it smelled like ambition. Now she was quoting a lawyer like she was reading off a menu. She tapped the envelope once with 2 fingers. French manicured. Her wine glass was untouched, but not because she was nervous. She wanted a clear head. She was savoring this. And that's when I knew. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't about love or betrayal or even me. It was preparation. I reached for the steak knife, not fast, not slow, just deliberate. Cut a corner off the meat. Chewed. Swallowed. Then I set the fork down beside the plate like I was ending a meal I didn't order. Then don't expect a single word from me either, I said. Calm. Almost cheerful. Like we were splitting the check. Her eyes twitched, just slightly. She wasn't ready for that. She expected the usual script. Outrage, shouting, a wounded pride clawing for scraps. She thought she'd trapped me in a performance where she controlled every cue. Instead, I stood up. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just done. I nodded once toward her lawyer, some pinstripe-suited chihuahua with gelled hair and a cheap Rolex he probably financed for the courtroom look. And then I walked out of my own house. No suitcase. No slamming doors. No speeches. Just silence. The kind of silence that makes people nervous. The kind that smells like something coming. But Claire didn't know that yet. She was too busy smiling at her victory steak. Claire watched the front door close like it was a punchline. She didn't even wait for the lawyer to say anything. Just let out this smug little chuckle, half under her breath, half for show. So much for a fight, she said, spearing a cold asparagus like she'd just wrapped a boardroom negotiation, not gutted a 14-year marriage. The lawyer looked confused. I saw it, briefly, before I walked out. Like he wasn't sure if he'd just watched a man surrender or something else entirely. He glanced at her, probably expecting a follow-up move, some gloating, maybe a toast. But Claire didn't need that. In her mind, she'd already won. Gavin wasn't stomping around, wasn't begging, wasn't even asking questions. She mistook that for weakness. Back inside, she poured herself a glass of Pinot Grigio like a queen rewarding herself after a clean execution. The kitchen light buzzed above her head. One of those LED strips I installed myself 3 years ago when we still had joint projects and late-night snacks. She never liked that light. Too harsh, she said. But now it suited her mood perfectly. Bright, surgical. She went upstairs after dinner and opened his closet. Half the hangers were empty. A few drawers too. His passport was gone. His laptop. The safe. Open. Clean. Nothing left but the user manual. She paused. That wasn't expected. But instead of worry, she settled on rationalization. He's just being dramatic, she muttered. Let him have his little silent tantrum. She slept diagonally across the bed that night. Wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets we bought on a trip to Milan, back when they couldn't afford them but did anyway because Gavin said, if we're exhausted, we might as well be exhausted luxuriously. Now the bed was all hers. The house was all hers. Or so she thought. She didn't know about the browser history he'd wiped from the shared computer. The appointment 3 weeks ago at a private bank in Boston. Or the burner phone hidden in the lining of the old winter coat she always told him to donate. She thought the silence meant surrender. It didn't. It meant checkmate in 12. First thing I did was drive straight past my office. I didn't even slow down. Let the automatic gate close behind me like it wasn't mine anymore. Let Claire wonder if I was licking my wounds at a hotel or crying on some buddy's couch. I wasn't. I was already 4 hours north, in a coffee shop that didn't take Apple Pay and still used punch cards. Perfect. From there, it was all timing. 2 nights earlier, before the stake, before the smug, you'll walk away with nothing, I'd transferred the bulk of our liquid assets to a brokerage in the Caymans. Not illegally, not dramatically, just methodically. A dozen small transfers routed through our joint checking, then split into separate dummy LLCs I'd set up over the course of 6 months. Names like Northwell Logistics and Maple Sycamore Holdings. Boring on purpose. Claire never noticed. She didn't notice much once she started working late. Next, I opened a family trust. Not in my name, God no. In my sister Amelia's. She's a school teacher with no social media and a fondness for actual books. No one looks at Amelia. No one ever did. Which made her the perfect guardian for what was coming next. She didn't even blink when I told her. Claire's finally doing it. I nodded. She just poured me tea and said, "Give me the keys. I'll handle the P.O. box too." Then came the crypto wallet. I'd mined Bitcoin back in 2012, back when it was a joke to most people and a curiosity to me. Claire always called it my digital monopoly money. Cute. She didn't know I still had the private keys printed and stored in a waterproof envelope taped inside the casing of an old stereo in the garage. She definitely didn't know the value had quietly passed $400,000. I sold the whole thing within 48 hours. Split it across 3 exchanges. All under pseudonyms linked to offshore passport IDs I had prepped just in case life ever demanded a reset. At this point, I wasn't just disappearing. I was becoming smoke. I pulled my name off joint utilities, closed my gym membership, had the key fob mailed to the front desk with no return address, called the HR department at my old firm and told them I'd be consulting remotely for the next quarter, effective immediately. No explanation. They didn't need one. I'd made them too much money over the years to get questioned now. Everything was a calculated erasure. Each move just legal enough to be clean, just silent enough to be invisible. Claire thought she'd blindsided me. But this wasn't a reaction. It was an execution plan that had been quietly simmering for over a year, ever since I found that Uber receipt in her jacket pocket. A ride to a hotel she swore she never went to. She lied, of course. She always did it like breathing. But instead of confronting her, I filed the receipt, made copies, took screenshots of bank statements, set up alerts on our accounts, and waited. That was the difference. Claire thought marriage was a stage. I treated it like a chessboard, and she just handed me her queen. Claire lit the patio torches like she was prepping for a coronation. Not a leaf out of place, not a wine glass without the perfect pour of Chianti. She even had the caterer fold the napkins into little fans, just subtle enough to whisper luxury without trying. The guest list was tight, 6 women, all with husbands who traveled too much or touched too little, each of them dressed like they were auditioning for a reality show called Affluent and Dead Inside. "I handled it," she said mid-toast, holding her glass like it weighed nothing. He just sat there, like a mannequin. Didn't even try to argue. Just stood up and left. The table gasped with the kind of feminine delight that only happens when another woman's marriage implodes just right. "I always thought Gavin had more bite," one of them said. Claire tilted her head like a cat in the sun. "Turns out he was just good at pretending." Another sip. Another laugh. Another round of "you're better off." She'd waited a long time to play the role of the calm, victorious ex. The woman who didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even flinch. And now, she performed it flawlessly. Between bites of duck confit and roasted figs, she laid out her rewritten version of the truth. He was weak, unambitious, too passive, too safe. "Sometimes," she said, smiling like a confessional saint, "you don't realize how much someone holds you back until they're gone." They loved that line. One of them even wrote it down. Online, her persona was a mirror of that same delusion. She updated her profile photo to one of those overly posed, candid shots, eyes squinting in sunlight, half laughing, holding a glass of something expensive. New season. New energy. New me. The likes flooded in. Comments like "Get it, Queen," and "Gavin who?" were her dopamine hits. And beneath all of it, she really believed it. She thought she was finally free. That the man who once fixed her father's entire HVAC system just to avoid hiring a contractor had slunk away, embarrassed and broken, never to resurface. She didn't notice that the tags on the property's financial accounts had changed. She didn't wonder why the house's utility bills started coming in brown envelopes labeled with LLC names she didn't recognize. She certainly didn't check the last shared Dropbox folder we used for tax season, which now contained a single, locked PDF titled Claire Final. To her, it was all over. To me, the curtain had just risen. The cabin I rented had no Wi-Fi, no cell reception, and no neighbors within screaming distance. Which was perfect because I wasn't there to scream. I was there to build. 3 days after the dinner where Claire toasted my supposed weakness with duck confit, I sat on a porch chair with a legal pad, a burner laptop, and the business card of a man named Vincent Harlow. We met 5 years ago at a tech conference in San Diego. He wore leather boots and a linen suit and pitched me an AI-powered logistics model over cocktails. Back then, I was too anchored to risk it. Too safe, too domesticated. Now, I had nothing left to lose. I sent him a single sentence. "You still looking for someone who doesn't flinch?" He replied in 5 minutes. Where do we start? We built the prototype in under 2 weeks. A lean, ruthless little backend system that restructured warehouse loadouts in real time based on driver patterns and road conditions. Sexy? No. Sellable? Very. I named the company Drift Core because everything in my life had just shifted off course, and because Claire hated the word drift. Said it sounded like failure. I like that. Vincent wired the seed money without blinking. I signed the documents under a new holding company, an umbrella LLC set up through a proxy firm in Wyoming. No trace to me, no Gavin Halpern on the dotted line. Just an entity named DF Collective Ventures, where DF stood for Don't Forget. A little joke between me and the fire still burning in my gut. By the 3rd week, we had a functioning demo. By the 4th, we had interest from 2 mid-sized logistics firms in Texas. I worked in silence. No Twitter announcements, no LinkedIn updates, no desperate rebranding posts about starting over. Just momentum. Clean, quiet momentum. While Claire was posting sunsets and captions about learning to let go, I was engineering the very thing that would eclipse her world entirely. Every time I closed a deal, I imagined her somewhere across town adjusting the throw pillows in her house, blissfully unaware that the equity she thought she deserved was rapidly becoming worthless. She'd taken the front-facing part of my life. The name, the house, the headlines, but not the engine. That was always mine. And now, it was roaring back to life. Faster, sharper, and completely out of her reach. Claire was doing yoga in the sunroom when the call came in. She answered on speaker, her voice breathy with faux serenity, like she was mid-enlightenment. "This is Claire." Her lawyer's voice wasn't calm. "There's been a change." She blinked, wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. "A change in what?" "The property title. The house." She paused. The downward dog collapsed. "What about it?" "Your husband, Gavin, removed his name from the deed." Quietly. "For months ago." Silence. She sat up, mat creasing under her. "That's impossible. It's joint property. We bought it together." "Yes. But the business holding that property lien was solely in his name. He transferred the deed through that holding." "You said." "I said we were assuming joint ownership. But Gavin was the one who filed all original purchase documents through Halpern Strategic Holdings, LLC. Remember?" Her heart sank. That name. She barely remembered it. Thought it was some tax efficiency crap Gavin insisted on back when they were still pretending to be a power couple. "You told me we had leverage." "And we did. Until he rewrote the rules behind our backs." Claire's fingers trembled as she muted the call. She looked around the sunroom, her sanctuary, with its overpriced succulents and imported woven rug, and suddenly, it all felt like someone else's Airbnb. Because it was. She unmuted. "So what does that mean, legally?" A pause. "It means the house is in your name now, but under conditional transfer." You technically own the building, but not the land it sits on. And the tax shield Gavin wrapped around the holding company, it's airtight. You can't sell, refinance, or use it as leverage in court. It's yours, but it's a paperweight. Claire stared at the wall. He planned this, she whispered. Oh yes, the lawyer said, voice low. He planned this before you even filed. Maybe before you even thought about filing. Click. She sat there in the silence, heart pounding, realization creeping in like mold in a perfect home. The man she thought she outplayed hadn't just left the board. He redesigned it. The envelope was thick, official, and came certified. Claire signed for it with the same dismissive wave she used on waiters who brought the wrong wine. She opened it at the kitchen island. Her island now marble-veined, Instagram approved, curated for the illusion of control. Inside, a letterhead stamped with the county assessor's office and the words notice of delinquent tax assessment and pending repossession. She laughed, out loud, because that had to be a mistake. She reread it. Slower. 3 years' worth of unpaid commercial property tax. Accruing interest. Warnings already issued, none of which she'd seen. Property listed under Halpern Strategic Holdings, LLC. A business entity, not a person. The fine print might as well have been in blood. Due to unresolved liens, said property is subject to immediate repossession and auction, per local ordinance. She stood there, holding the page like it was radioactive. Her hands shook, but she told herself it was caffeine. Not fear. Not fury. She called the lawyer. He answered like he'd been waiting for the call. Claire, I assume you've read it. What the hell is this? The tax responsibility wasn't personal. It was corporate. The land your house sits on, Gavin structured it as a commercial property held under his LLC. Technically, it wasn't tied to you during the marriage. But when he transferred ownership to you, so did the debt. Her throat tightened. So, this house. You own the walls, the roof, the mailbox, but not the dirt beneath it. And that dirt has about $182,000 in back taxes tied to a business you have no legal right to touch. She dropped into the bar stool. The one she'd told everyone was Italian. He knew, she whispered. Claire, he built this. It hit her like a second slap. The house she fought for in the divorce, the symbol of her win, her leverage, her narrative, was a financial coffin, gift wrapped in her name. And Gavin? Gavin had walked away smiling. He hadn't abandoned the battlefield. He just buried landmines on it. And now she was sitting in one. Claire was standing in line at her favorite juice bar, one of those overpriced, cold-pressed status temples where everyone pretends spirulina makes them whole, when her phone buzzed. She glanced down absently, expecting some influencer's vacation post or another dopamine-soaked affirmation about vibrations. Instead, she saw him, Gavin, front and center in a clean navy suit, smirking slightly in that way he always did when he knew something no one else did. The headline above the photo stopped her breath. From divorce to dominance. How silence made Gavin Halpern millions. She opened the article. Every word punched her straight in the stomach. It wasn't just a startup anymore. Driftcore had gone public that morning. Market value was already climbing. Investors were calling it one of the most surgical business pivots of the decade. The write-up detailed his strategic withdrawal from a high-profile divorce, how he chose silence over spectacle, and vanished, only to return with a product that rewired the logistics game. There were quotes from Vincent Harlow. He came to me with a plan so clear, I thought he'd spent 5 years drawing it in the dark. And then, because fate likes to twist the knife, there was a sidebar titled, What His Ex-Wife Lost. Her name wasn't even mentioned, just his former spouse. No identity, no credit, no acknowledgement. Claire scrolled furiously, heartbeat racing, palms clammy despite the air-conditioned interior. She could feel the woman behind her in line reading over her shoulder. The barista looked up and made eye contact for a little too long. Everyone had seen it. Everyone would see it. The group chats, the wine circle, her Pilates instructor, that smug receptionist at her lawyer's office. She tapped through to Gavin's newly reactivated LinkedIn profile. Millions of followers, a post simply captioned. Sometimes the best revenge is no reaction at all. 30,000 likes. Comments flooding in. Congratulatory. Worshipful. People quoting him like he was a philosopher. She had the house, The posts. The parties. He had a legacy, and it was trending. The text sat on Gavin's phone screen for a full hour before he even opened it. Claire, can we talk? Just 4 words. No punctuation, no emoji, no performance. Which was how he knew she meant it. She hadn't texted in weeks. Not after the article. Not after the county sent the second notice about the house. Not after the fundraiser invite she conveniently forgot to withdraw. But now, she was reaching. Gavin stared at the message like it was a fossil from a former life. Her name looked strange in his notification banner. Like seeing the title of a canceled show you used to binge, but now barely remember. He didn't answer right away. He didn't need to. Claire, meanwhile, sat in her car outside that same juice bar, phone clenched in her palm like a rosary. She kept the message thread open, refreshing it every 30 seconds, waiting for the typing bubbles. A sign. A crack. Anything. She drafted a dozen versions before sending that one. Some too emotional. Some too cold. Some apologizing without really apologizing. But she landed on "Can we talk?" because it felt neutral. Safe. She figured he'd want closure too. But Gavin wasn't playing by the old rules. When the response finally came, it wasn't what she expected. It was worse. Gavin, that part of me no longer exists. 7 words. No warmth. No room for follow-up. No anger, either. Just absence. A wall where there used to be a door. A void shaped like the man she used to know, now filled with concrete. Claire reread it 10 times. She blinked so hard her eyes burned. She thought there might be a second message. Some elaboration. Some footnote that would soften the hit. There wasn't. There would never be. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Lipstick smudged, eyes glassy, pretending to be someone who still had a script to follow. But Gavin had rewritten the ending without her. And he didn't even leave her a line. The change wasn't sudden. It came in glances first. The kind people give when they think you don't notice. Quick, judgmental, like a reflex they haven't bothered to suppress. At brunch, 3 of the women who once flooded Claire's feed with goddess energy and heart emojis now sat at the far end of the table, trading quiet smirks over mimosas while she tried to keep up conversation. One of them, Renee, the loudest during the divorce, kept looking at her plate like Claire's presence was ruining her appetite. She reached for her phone to distract herself. Opened Instagram. Renee had posted a story 10 minutes ago. A selfie with the caption, "Some people glow through peace. Others just implode quietly." Claire didn't need to ask who it was about. By the time the check came, half the table had already forgotten to include her in their next weekend plans. A charity gala. One she helped organize last year. We thought you were busy," someone said. Eyes not meeting hers. Busy with what? Her house was half empty. Her phone was silent. The lawyer had stopped returning her calls with urgency. Her trainer had reassigned her slot. Her realtor friend had gone mysteriously off the grid. At the salon, the stylist who used to offer champagne and therapy now kept appointments brief and businesslike. No compliments. No gossip. Just neutral tones and quick snips. She overheard the receptionist whispering when she walked out. "Is that the one?" "Yeah. The one who tried to gut Gavin and lost everything?" While Claire stood still just long enough for the silence to settle around her like fog. Even the people who once cheered her on were now hedging their bets, distancing themselves from her as if failure were contagious. No one said it out loud, but she knew. She miscalculated. She thought she'd be the phoenix rising from the ashes. Instead, she was just smoke. A cautionary tale wrapped in good lighting and expensive teeth. Gavin hadn't just taken back his power. He'd taken the room with him. The ballroom was dim, glowing in that curated prestige ambience kind of way. Light jazz, crystal chandeliers, glasses clinking over silent judgments. Claire wore deep navy silk and the last of her confidence. She hadn't seen Gavin in person since before. Not since he walked out of their dining room like he was stepping off a movie set, quiet, unreadable, already rewriting the script in his head. But now he was here, and everyone knew it. His name had been whispered before he even arrived. "Gavin Halpern's on the guest list," someone muttered at the bar. "You know, the guy with the logistics company. Made a fortune after that messy divorce." Someone else. "Did you hear he turned down Forbes just to avoid giving her more PR?" Claire sipped champagne that tasted like ash and turned, scanning the crowd. And there he was, near the silent auction table, in a charcoal suit so sharp it looked like it could cut glass. No tie, just effortless control. He was laughing, with two people she didn't recognize, probably venture capitalists or board members or whoever made up his new orbit. He looked good, healthy, polished, leaner even, like he'd shed more than just her. For a moment, the noise dimmed. The chatter faded. All she could hear was the buzz of her own heartbeat and the click of her heels as she walked toward him. 4 steps, then 6. She rehearsed nothing. She didn't need to. He'd always listened before, always softened if she just made eye contact. 10 steps. He turned, saw her. Their eyes locked, 2 lifetimes colliding in a half-second silence. She opened her mouth. Something, anything, poised to leave her lips. But Gavin, he just turned. No nod, no smirk, no words. Just turned on his heel and walked away like she wasn't even there. Like she was another distant sound in a crowded room. She stood there, mouth slightly open, a statue in silk and highlighter. Someone behind her laughed at something unrelated, but it echoed in her chest like a gunshot. She watched him disappear into a sea of people who didn't know her, who didn't care who she used to be. And for the first time, it hit her fully. She didn't lose Gavin. She lost relevance. The dining room was too quiet. Not peaceful, empty. Like sound itself avoided the space now. The same chandelier hummed overhead, but it didn't sparkle like it used to. Dust clung to its corners. One bulb flickered, dimly, stubbornly, like it was refusing to let go. Claire sat in her usual chair, the same one she occupied that night. The night she slid the manila envelope across the table like she was holding court. The night she delivered her sentence with that smug little phrase. "You'll walk away with nothing." She remembered the tone more than the words now. Cold, practiced, confident. She said it like she believed it, like she'd rehearsed it in the mirror for weeks. And Gavin had just looked at her, like he was seeing something dead and didn't want to say it out loud. Now, across from her, no plate, no man, just the table, still polished, still pristine. It was the only thing left that hadn't been repossessed, refinanced, or quietly reclaimed. The framed photo of them that once sat on the sideboard, gone. The champagne flutes from Milan, sold to cover property taxes she never knew existed. The chair where Gavin used to sit, tracing the lip of his wineglass with his finger while reading through contracts. That chair was there, but it felt like a grave marker now. She reached for the bottle of red, already half empty, and poured with a shaky hand. Didn't bother with a glass. Just drank. Straight from the neck like the rituals were over. No one came by anymore. No more brunch invites. No more sympathy texts. Even the lawyer had stopped taking her calls unless she paid for the hour in advance. Everyone had moved on, especially him. Driftcore had hit its next valuation. There were rumors of an acquisition. There was even talk that Gavin was engaged again to someone younger, quieter, less visible. Claire set the bottle down. Her voice cracked out like a ghost escaping her chest. He didn't say a word and still destroyed everything. And the room didn't answer. No echo, no acknowledgement, just silence. The exact silence he left behind. And now there was nothing left to talk over.